Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, People in Konoha. Look at me, Demacia. Chapter 21. Konosuke stared at the short sword, and there seemed to be only dancing lightning in his entire field of vision. The familiar feeling engraved deep in his soul suddenly hit his whole body. When did you encounter such an unbearable feeling? Time seems to have stopped at this moment, and everything has fallen into silence, which is this uncomfortable feeling. However, there are no eggs. Ding dong. At the critical moment, there was only a sound like glass breaking. Tamnu's inevitable knife seemed to stab a small transparent shield in front of Konosuke. The small shield could not withstand the huge force and shattered, but the blade he continued to move forward, but under this layer of resistance, he only pierced Konosuke's shoulder. Enduring the pain, Konosuke broke away from the blade with a trace of blood. At the same time, he waved the short sword, but his whole body spun at a very fast speed. Judgment. Unexpectedly, Tamnu had no time to be surprised by this series of emergencies. He saw the approaching spinning blade wheels. In this situation, he had no way to avoid it and could only stand up his blade to resist. Ding ding ding. The crisp sound of metal collisions continued to resound over the woods, causing swirling sparks to shoot out. Tamnu was shocked to find that the huge force in the whirling knife wheel was constantly increasing. Within a few moments, the huge force coming from the handle of the knife had already made his arm numb. In his shocked eyes, he had already been stabbed in the abdomen. Although it was not fatal, he took advantage of this gap, and before he could change any response methods, he felt another force coming from his abdomen. Bang! In the next moment, Tamnu was kicked away by Konosuke, and flew backwards by the jagged blade. Konosuke covered the bleeding wound, but his eyes became extremely strange at this moment. The opponent's lightning style is very tricky. The eyes filled with some inexplicable meaning reflected Tamnu, who fell on the ground but was still surrounded by traces of lightning. It seems that the trump card can no longer be hidden. Along with the low murmur, Konosuke slowly raised his head, and as an idea arose, he could feel the cells in his body jumping in detail, just like Butsuma. As a certain skill of Fate Star is activated, he can clearly feel that his own strength has been significantly improved in terms of speed and strength. Fatal blow. Based on the host's actual strength, a certain speed and attack power are increased within a certain time limit. If the host's attack hits the opponent's vital part within this time range, it will cause a silence effect and instantly cancel the opponent's ninjutsu, rights of use. The silence time can be determined according to the opponent's strength. Obviously, the skill that has been tampered with is Galen's signature skill Big Q. However, the difference is that Galen's Q will definitely have a silencing effect on the opponent after hitting the opponent. However, after the tampering, Konosuke needs when the skill takes effect, it must hit the opponent's vital points to silence the opponent. This is also the reason why Chunin Chakra, who was stabbed in the vital point by Konosuke that time, was sealed. Tamnu stood up quickly from the ground with a chilled look on his face. Although he was not killed with one blow, when his shoulder was pierced and a powerful blow erupted, the boy would definitely not be able to resist his next wave of attacks. Thinking of this, Tamnu's eyes flashed with murderous intent, and he looked at the giggling Konosuke. His face that was full of chills suddenly turned cold, but he stopped talking nonsense and directly raised his sword to attack again. Ding! Following the clear sound of golden iron, an incredible scene appeared. What? He saw an incredible scene. The speed of the kid who had his shoulder pierced by him did not subside but increased significantly. How can this be? Tamnu struggled to say these words, with disbelief on his face. Then there was a series of fighting sounds, but something happened that surprised Tamnu. This kid was actually able to keep up with his movements and fought on a par with him. How did he do it? The more Tamnu fought, the more frightened he became. You must know that he was able to show such a strong combat power due to the activation of cells in his body by lightning style. However, how did this kid suddenly improve? Is it Konoha's secret technique? Tamnu frowned deeply and murmured to himself. However, unlike his surprise, Konosuke now has a wry smile in his heart. Now he can only draw with Tamnu by activating his skills. As for hitting vital points, it is simply a delusion. If he had known that a fatal blow would be possible, there is a time limit. If the time is up and you have not turned defeat into victory in the battle, then you can imagine the outcome waiting for you after the time limit reaches and your speed and strength drop drastically. It seems that we must use the ability of the second life star. Konosuke silently made a decision in his heart, but in his injured left hand, there was a knife that was always glowing with a crimson light. At the same time, Tamnu looked at Konosuke, who was almost at the same speed as himself, who was covered in lightning, and his eyes were not only shocked, but also shocked. Using chakra's nature transformation to transform into thunder and lightning stimulates cell division at high speed to achieve an activated body. Not everyone can master this ability. Even Cloud Shinobi, who is good at using lightning style, only some people can skillfully use this technique. The most beautiful one is of course Reikage from Cloud Shinobi village. However, the kid from Konoha village in front of me can actually use a secret technique that is comparable to lightning style and can activate the vitality of cells in the body. This reality is too incredible. What kind of secret technique can achieve this effect? Isn't it true that lightning style is the only one in the entire ninja world that can maximize the activation of cells in the body? However, the scene in front of him forced Tamnu to accept this reality. In just about 10 breaths of time, the entire person's strength has actually increased so much. Although it doesn't look too proficient, it is terrible to reach such an almost perfect level. Thinking of this, Tamnu's murderous intention suddenly surged. A junior like him is really terrifying. He will definitely become the terrifying enemy of the entire Cloud Shinobi in the future. But now, this may be the only chance to kill the opponent easily. Stimulating cell division can certainly increase speed, but this secret technique requires a lot of chakra. At best, it is just a kid's ninja. The amount of chakra must not be much. Even if he can't be killed with a quick attack, with his current strength, as long as he suppresses it, it is feasible to hold him and let his chakra run out. Tamnu thought silently in his heart. It was not until this moment that he truly treated Konosuke as an opponent on the same level as him, and he became relatively serious in all aspects. After a while, it was unknown how many Konoha shinobi were about to come for support. Tamnu, who knew that he could no longer delay, suddenly appeared in front of Konosuke, and the short sword wrapped with lightning in his hand stabbed straight into his face. Door. After being strengthened by fatal blows, Konosuke's combat effectiveness has been greatly improved. For the short sword that was coming straight at him, he just turned his feet slightly as if he knew all its trajectories, and easily dodged it. Tamnu seemed to have expected that this stab would be dodged by Konosuke. The moment he missed it, he turned the handle of the knife sideways, and the blade faced Konosuke's neck and slashed across it. Before the knife arrived, the sharp wind of the knife had already irritated his neck. There was an icy cold light in the corner of his eyes. Konosuke lowered his head suddenly and dodged the knife coming towards his neck. Then he moved his arm and the kunai directly slashed towards Tamnu's wrist. The latter's eyes flashed and he raised his head very quickly. He kicked Konosuke's wrist away, then turned around, and with the help of twisting his waist, he slashed towards Konosuke's side with a knife, as if intending to cut Konosuke's shoulder in half diagonally. This sword is powerful and powerful. Konosuke hurriedly adjusted his posture, retracted his arm, raised the kunai and held the knife accurately. However, the strong force from the knife instantly caused his wrist to hurt. Konosuke frowned. The time limit for the fatal blow was almost up. The decline in speed and strength intuitively reflected this. However, the opponent was so strong that he had not found any flaws yet. Although he still has a trump card in his hand, if he can't kill him with one hit against Cloud Shinobi's powerful Jonin, he will be in danger later. We must find his flaw. A certain decision in his heart was fleeting, and a glimmer of light flashed in Konosuke's eyes, and he resisted Tamnu's knife with all his strength. However, the latter's short sword had just been pushed away, and he went towards Konosuke's face at a faster speed. Konosuke's expression remained unchanged. His feet were on the ground, his head was slightly tilted back, and he jumped back quickly with one step. Tisk. Blood splatters. A deep wound appeared on Konosuke's body from his chest to his abdomen. It seemed that the bonus brought by the fatal blow was not much left. Even though he reacted and dodged in time, he could not avoid this knife. The smell of blood filled the silent night. Konosuke endured the pain and stepped back. The damage caused by this knife was enough to completely overwhelm him in the subsequent offensive. Kid, you have to stop here after all. Naturally, Tamnu clearly felt the changes in Konosuke's body. At this moment, he looked coldly at the deep and long wound on Kinosuke's chest, and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then, his eyes trembled slightly, and he realized he actually relaxed a little for an attack that decided the outcome, for a kid. He raised his head slightly, took a deep breath, and with the help of a short sword, he walked over the corpses of powerful enemies one by one. This had never been done before. For a moment, a fleeting palpitation passed by vaguely, as if it's an illusion. No matter what, just kill him. Tamnu paused for a moment, his whole body boiling with lightning, and the jumping leaf on the short sword became a little thicker. Laugh. There was a slight hiss in the air. Tamnu disappeared in an instant, and the next second, he appeared in front of Kinosuke. It was the speed that he used up all the remaining chakra to burst out. He didn't believe that this time, the seriously injured Kinosuke could still dodge. However, he didn't notice a pale arc appearing at the corner of Kinosuke's mouth. The black pupils were full of calm, showing no trace of panic or unwillingness due to the upcoming attack. The blue electric light was as bright as day, reflecting deeply into Kinosuke's eyes. The arrival of the short sword entwined with lightning seemed to easily pierce into his chest, where his heart was. The opportunity has come. A hint of joy appeared in Hinosuke's eyes, and a crimson dagger slipped out of his sleeve. With a slight wave, he had disappeared. How is it possible? Before the joyful smile faded from Tamnu's face, it was replaced by shock. Kinosuke, who was supposed to be stabbed in the chest by him, suddenly disappeared. Body flicker technique. No, it's impossible. Not to mention that only a few people can master the body flicker technique even among Jonin. And just now I couldn't see any trace of using the body flicker technique. What on earth do you think? How was it done? Tamnu was completely shocked. He asked with a fierce look on his face, but his body was on full alert. However, it was too late to be on guard at this time. By the time he felt something was wrong, a cold blade of light had already penetrated his chest. Even though he relied on his years of experience and physical reactions to avoid the position of his heart, he was still affected by it, suffered quite serious fatal injuries. However, this was not the most serious thing. As the blood flew away, the thunderbolts surrounding Tamnu disappeared without a trace in an instant as if they were being ripped off by something. Tamnu was surprised to find that his induction of chakra was actually disconnected. At this time, I seemed like an ordinary person who had never condensed chakra at all. The fatal blow comes with a silence spell. You sinner whose hands are stained with blood, let me punish you on behalf of this day. Just when Tamnu was frightened, a sound like a whisper in the ear and a slap in the face came from behind. Justice from heaven. A huge intimidating force came from above the head, and Tamnu couldn't help but look up, only to see a huge sword that had been condensed into shape. The strength in his whole body receded quickly like a tide. Tamnu glanced at the blood gushing out of his left chest, and then looked up at the huge sword hanging above his head. He looked at Kinosuke, who was so close to him that he could hardly stand even while fighting, and the corner of his mouth, but he suddenly showed a ferocious smile. I actually lost to a kid in a must-win situation. You are very good. What is the name of this move? In the distant Great Celestial Empire, there is a kind of palm technique that falls from the sky, and mine is exactly the same as it. Hinosuke vomited blood while not forgetting to compile the origin of this move seriously. Great Heavenly Dynasty. Boom. After a while, the smoke dissipated, and the doubts in Tamnu's eyes had long solidified. His strong body hit the grass heavily, and the scarlet blood dyed the green grass red in a few breaths. Kinosuke lowered his head, raised his eyes and looked forward, just in time to see the doubts on Tamnu's face before he died, and couldn't help but laugh silently. I'm a great dynasty, you guys don't understand. Kinosuke just sat there with his back against the tree trunk. Blood kept pouring out of the wound. In addition, a series of combos used up all the chakra and physical strength. Such an injury, no matter how good his physique is, will be healed in a short time. Death. Although he won in the end, he still had to face death. Not only was it the feeling of powerlessness caused by the loss of blood from the wounds on his body, but also the powerful sense of space tearing from the ability he had just used almost shattered him into pieces. If I go, I'll almost be torn to pieces. Thinking of the sense of crisis and huge pain when he entered the space just for a short moment, Hinosuke couldn't help but feel scared. Ma Dan, I will never use this trick again. Feeling the gradually disappearing strength, as well as the weakness and intense pain in the limbs like tarsal maggots clinging to them, it seems that one can clearly feel the despair of the cells in the body and the loss of life. A smile appeared on Kinosuke's face. Actually, I think it's nice to stay in the Hokage world. The breath of death is getting closer and closer, as if it is oppressing the surrounding air, making breathing more and more difficult. If you die, will your soul return to Earth? Kinosuke has read a lot of various time-traveling books, but none of the books have mentioned the situation where a time traveler dies early before he has accomplished anything. Bah! Someone spat out a mouthful of blood and cursed with a smile, it's all a trick. Everyone is afraid of death, but when death is approaching and the body is tortured by pain and can only wait slowly, the whole heart calms down. Kinosuke endured the pain in his body, but he could only stare forward with his eyes open motionless. The rumored memory flow like a movie did not appear. He could only hear his own weak heartbeat at this moment. Slowly, his eyes became darker and darker, and when endless darkness was about to fill his eyes, a smile suddenly appeared on the corner of Kinosuke's mouth. He tried hard to open his mouth, but did not want to make any sound. The routine is indeed powerful. He was thinking this in his mind, and on the eve of his coma, he saw a blend of red and yellow. When Minato came with Kushina in his arms, the two happened to see Kinosuke sitting on the tree trunk from a distance, his head suddenly tilted. That action instantly touched their hearts and frightened both of them. Joy helps, joy helps, joy helps. There seemed to be a familiar voice calling his name, and that voice sounded like Kushina's loud voice. Hearing that voice, Kinosuke was stunned and suddenly looked in the direction where the voice came from. However, his eyelids were so heavy that he could not open them, and he only saw endless darkness. He wanted to shout, but his lips were tightly closed. He wanted to move, but his limbs were as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Then, he helplessly found that the voice was getting weaker and weaker, getting farther and farther, and finally, he sank into the abyss, in the darkness. Happiness helps, happiness helps. Kushina held Kinosuke's blood-stained hand with tears streaming down her face. If Kinosuke had not come to save her, she would not have been so seriously injured if she knew medical ninjutsu. After carefully checking Kinosuke's condition, Minato's heart sank to the bottom. The initial joy of discovering that Kinosuke still had a weak breath disappeared instantly. Although the bleeding speed of the wound is slowing down, the injury is too serious. I can't help but send him back to the village for treatment as soon as possible. Speaking of this, Minato looked sad. This place was close to the border. It was impossible to come back to Konoha village in time for treatment, if one of the two knew medical ninjutsu. No, there must be a way, right? There must be. Kushina's heart suddenly suffocated, and she looked at Minato and murmured in despair. Minato faced Kushina's disappointed gaze and bit his lip. If there was another way, he could only hope that one of the chasing Konoha shinobi would have medical ninjutsu, but this possibility was very low, and even if there was medical treatment ninja, it's not that easy to save Kinosuke's life. Anyway, you can't let go of any opportunity. By the way, do you have anything to eat with you? Minato looked at Kinosuke's slightly opened mouth and said as if he suddenly thought of something. Kushina was stunned for a moment, and immediately understood what Minato meant. She hurriedly opened all the items they carried, found a piece of dry food and fed it to Kinosuke's mouth. They had the best relationship with Kinosuke, and were naturally very familiar with some of his characteristics. Learn. Minato looked at Kushina who was feeding Kinosuke. He turned his eyes to a big tree and made up his mind. Most people in Konoha village did not know that Kushina was the new Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Therefore, after Kushina was kidnapped, the third Hokage did not mobilize troops, but sent many elites. The ninja who was running in the forest at night twitched his ears slightly and heard a loud noise coming from the southwest. The person closest to the noise was a white-haired young man. When he heard the sound, he immediately jumped to the top of the tree. Under the bright white moonlight, he saw countless leaves rolled up in the sky not far to the southwest, and his eyes couldn't help but condense. Even though the fanciful momentum was more like a notification in the shape of beacon, he did not relax because of it. He kept vigilance and rushed in that direction without slowing down his speed. The Konoha shinobi who were closer noticed the movement and couldn't help but start heading in that direction. When the white-haired ninja arrived, he first smelled the strong smell of blood, and then saw his students. Minato. Jiraiya shouted towards Minato, and then looked at Kinosuke, who was sitting on the tree trunk. His expression couldn't help but change. The blood-covered situation was really tragic. Teacher. Seeing that the person coming was Jiraiya, disappointment flashed across Minato's eyes. The same was true for Kushina. Unexpectedly, although the first person to come was Sanin, it was not Tsunade. Jiraiya keenly saw the disappointment flashing across the eyes of the two people, and smiled bitterly, looking at Kinosuke, who was weak in breath, with a look of helplessness on his face. What kind of opponent did this child encounter? With this thought in mind, Jiraiya looked at Kinosuke's injuries and found that there was very little blood flowing out of such a large wound, and it was already showing signs of healing. He couldn't help but frown. This phenomenon reminded him of the worst outcome, which was that the blood loss in Kinosuke's body was too serious, but the healing of the wound made him immediately reject this idea. Touching his chin, Jiraiya looked at the child in front of him, who had a temperament that was very similar to Orochimaru's when he was a child. He sighed regretfully. He was seriously injured. Although the wound showed signs of healing, there was so much blood. I'm afraid even if Tsunade comes, he will be injured. This sentence was like thunder in the ears of Kushina and Minato. How could? Kushina's eyes trembled. Minato turned his head away and clenched his fists hard. If he chose to stay at that time, he might not be able to catch up with Kushina so quickly, but at least he could kill his opponent with the strength of two people. In this case, Kinosuke might not be able to. The sadness of the two people did not last long, and they suddenly heard a crisp scolding voice. Step aside. Then, Jiraiya and the others saw a slender figure rushing towards them very quickly, and in a very short time they had already arrived in front of them. Tsunade. After seeing the person clearly, Jiraiya couldn't help but feel happy. Idiot. Glancing at Jiraiya, Tsunade ignored Minato and Kushina and immediately began to treat the seriously injured Kinosuke. She could sense the still active life breath in Kinosuke's body. As soon as she arrived, she heard that Jiraiya had sentenced Kinosuke to death, and she was immediately rude to Jiraiya. Kid, don't die so easily. Tsunade looked solemn, gritted his teeth slightly, and concentrated on treating Kinosuke. Minato and Kushina were extremely surprised by Tsunade's sudden arrival, but they did not dare to disturb them. They could only watch quietly from the side, with more expectations in their hearts. Ah, now that Tsunade is here, you don't have to worry. Jiraiya scratched his head in embarrassment and walked over slowly. He didn't know about Kinosuke's special physique, but Tsunade, who had just come into contact with Kinosuke's body, knew. After a while, people came to this place again. Orochimaru. Jiraiya looked at the person coming, but Sanin gathered together. Orochimaru jumped down from the tree, nodded towards Jiraiya, and then looked at Kinosuke, who was covered in blood, his cold snake eyes showing no emotion. His eyes suddenly moved to look at the corpse lying not far away, and his eyes froze slightly. Cloud Shinobi Tamnu. Hearing this name, Jiraiya couldn't help but be stunned. His attention was distracted by Kinosuke as soon as he arrived. He didn't have time to pay too much attention to the dead body. At this time, he couldn't help but look at the body and found that the body was really Tamnu. Raised his eyelids in surprise. This kid can actually kill Cloud Shinobi's master. Jiraiya looked shocked. It seems that the battle is very fierce. Orochimaru picked up the short sword that Tamnu had dropped aside and observed it carefully for a moment, then withdrew his cold, razor-sharp gaze and turned to Kinosuke, who was being treated by Tsunade. Jiraiya clearly saw the inexplicable emotion flashing across Orochimaru's eyes. How could that cold-tempered man also have such emotions? Teacher, is Tamnu very powerful? Minato asked softly. Jiraiya nodded and said, Tamnu is a special Jonin in Cloud Shinobi village. Although his overall strength is not strong, he is a master of swordsmanship. His physical skills and speed are very powerful. He is extremely tricky. Sometimes even Jonin, if you are not careful, you will be killed by this person. After saying that, Jiraiya looked at Kinosuke with a thoughtful look on his face. He didn't think that a mere genin who had never been on the battlefield could deal with such a difficult person. Even a genius couldn't do anything about such a huge contrast in strength, because Tamnu cooperated with lightning. Styles' method of stimulating physical activity is enough to make his sword skills difficult to detect with the naked eye, and how is it possible for Kinosuke to defeat such a person? He looked searchingly at Orochimaru, who looked cold but showed no intention of explaining. After Minato heard Jiraiya's explanation, he realized how terrifying the opponent Konosuke faced. At this time, Tsunade suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and removed his hand from Konosuke's wound. The green light slowly disappeared. Tsunade-sama, Kushina helps him. Seeing the end of the treatment, Kushina looked at Tsunade with hope. It's not life-threatening, but it still needs to be brought back to the village for recuperation as soon as possible. Tsunade responded casually, with a hint of doubt in his eyes, and glanced at the missing large part of Konosuke's left arm. Great, really great. Kushina's tense body finally relaxed after hearing that Konosuke's life was not in danger. The feeling of dying is like the oxygen in the chest being squeezed out in an instant. The sudden suffocation creates subconscious fear and gradually takes away all the sense of touch you have. In the increasingly dark space, you continue to sink. No one wants to have that kind of experience again. A sakura tree was planted not far from the ninja hospital. When the flowers were blooming, the faint floral fragrance floated from afar, passed through the window, and brushed against Konosuke's nose. The morning sun was warm but not dazzling, falling on the pale face. There's nothing better than a beautiful view on such a good time. Konosuke looked at the sky outside the window, but he was unusually open-minded. Although no one would face death so calmly, after experiencing a series of time travel events, someone can see clearly. This kind of life is really exciting. Walking from the darkness, listening to the familiar voices that were getting farther and farther away, I could even touch a certain existence on the edge. I walked in the endless darkness for an unknown amount of time before I found the only glimmer of light. Just like a drowning person finally breaking free from the shackles of water, struggling to open his mouth and greedily breathing air. Only when you almost lose it can you understand its beauty, truly understand the meaning of life, and want to enjoy life even more. This is the joy of being alive. By the way, should I continue to pretend to be sick and rest for a few more months? Konosuke slowly clenched his fists, his dark eyes gently squinting, enjoying the sunlight shining through the curtains. I think it's best that you don't do that. Click. The door opened without warning. A long black lady with her signature white eyes walked in carrying a fruit basket, followed by Minato, Kushina and Gang Yuensho who looked helpless. Hearing the sound, Konosuke's lips curved into a smile. Hey, aren't you on a mission? Everyone. Hyuga Schwerin walked over and put the fruit basket on the table. Looking at his face that had lost too much blood and turned pale, his words involuntarily revealed a hint of concern and asked, "Does the wound still hurt?" I think it will take more than a month to recover. No matter what he said before, under the black line of everyone, Konosuke prepared a word for his laziness in a serious manner. Hyuga Schwerin squeezed her white fist gently. Asshole, you think we didn't hear anything? Gang Yuensho came over at this time, looked at Konosuke's pale face, and said, "You really scared me to death. Even if you want to train, there is no need to go to such a dangerous place." That day when he learned that Konosuke was injured, he immediately rushed to the hospital to visit him. What he saw was Konosuke who was wrapped up like a mummy and fell into a coma. Konosuke curled his lips and refused to comment. When he woke up yesterday, Orochimaru had already given a brief explanation of the relevant matters. Regarding the matter of Kushina being kidnapped this time, he also understood it after watching the plot. Kushina's existence as a Jinchuriki in the village is a secret of the village, but it is not allowed to be spread too widely. Hostile ninjas invaded and took Kushina hostage. Konosuke was seriously injured trying to rescue Kushina. The official explanation given in the end was that he was too confident and went to the forest outside the village for training and was accidentally seriously injured. Fortunately, he was discovered in time and retrieved her alive. Konosuke expressed his dissatisfaction with the village's deliberate attempt to vilify itself, because everyone knew that I was so low-key, so why did I go to the forest outside the village for training so aggressively? No one believes this statement at all. But seeing the reproachful looks from Gang Yuensho and Hyuga Schwerin, Hyuga couldn't help but be speechless. But that doesn't matter to him anymore. What really worries him is not this, but the body of Jonin, Tamnu, that he forgot to sacrifice. A Jonin. How many points does this cost? Someone felt like crying for a while, but it was impossible to sacrifice Tamnu. After all, it was a Jonin who suddenly disappeared after fighting with him. This couldn't be explained. There were very few sacrifice points left for the perfect integration of Galen's life star last time and the use of a certain skill of the second life star yesterday. He had to find a way to earn sacrifice points. Minato stood quietly on the side of the hospital bed. The sunlight coming from the window made his blonde hair even more dazzling. He looked at Konosuke on the hospital bed with a hint of admiration in his dark blue eyes. He has always had a softer personality and never competes with others, but he has always had absolute confidence in his own strength. However, since Konosuke appeared, he discovered that competition is not a bad thing, especially when this person has caught up and surpassed him. Own. Hyuga Schwerin picked up a red apple, smiled at Konosuke and asked, "Want to eat an apple?" Gang Yuanshu's eyes became strange when he saw this, and Hyuga Schwerin's appearance was so uncoordinated. Kushina was also paying more attention to Hyuga Schwerin. Seeing Hyuga Schwerin's gentle smile, she seemed to have discovered something strange. She looked at Minato aside and showed a smile of understanding. Hyuga Schwerin did not notice the changes between the two of them. If she had noticed, she might accidentally crush the apple in her hand. In the past, Konosuke might have made a joke and politely refused, but after experiencing a death threat, he has learned to accept everything calmly. Konosuke raised his eyebrows and opened his mouth wide to express his attitude. Hyuga Schwerin's arm holding the apple trembled without a trace. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes, but he pretended to be impatient and said calmly, "Konosuke, you are getting lazy." Quote. Although he said this in his mouth, he couldn't help but start peeling the apples in his hands. Konosuke smiled faintly and turned his head to look at the blue sky outside the window, feeling that a certain shackle in his heart had gradually begun to loosen. Gang Yuansho looked at Konosuke, who looked calm, and then looked at Hyuga Schwerin, who had a faint smile on his lips. He didn't know what to say for a moment. He seemed to have noticed something vaguely. After saying this, the two look very much like a couple. If there's nothing else, we'll leave first. Minato could naturally tell something and winked at Kushina, who was standing aside. The two of them smiled in unison and walked directly to the door. Oh, Gang Yuansho was stunned. Perhaps he thought that Konosuke was so seriously injured that he must need rest. He couldn't help but said to Konosuke, "Konosuke, I'm leaving then. Get well soon. I'll treat you to food then. Barbecue. I want to eat at the most expensive one." Seeing Gang Yuansho with a black streak follow Minato and the two, a sense of guilt arose in Konosuke's heart. Why do I feel like a rich second generation who stole a poor boy's girlfriend? By the way, if Gang Yuansho understood, he wouldn't travel through time, right? Someone murmured, but there was a chill in his heart. However, he never expected that a knife suddenly came out from the side and a piece of apple was inserted into Konosuke's mouth. "Schwerin, are you planning to kill me? Minato, wait for me." Gang Yuansho waved and called as soon as he left the hospital. Minato and Kushina slowed down, waiting for Gang Yuansho to catch up. "Minato, do you think Konosuke and Schwerin are weird?" Gang Yuansho glanced at Minato, and without any scruples, directly expressed his opinion. Minato and Kushina were speechless for a moment. Of course they noticed that although Konosuke always greeted everyone with a smile, behind that smile he could always feel a sense of rejection that could never be reconciled with this world. Although Kushina got along relatively well with him, they usually didn't as they got along. They also felt that Konosuke instinctively kept a certain distance from them. After surviving the catastrophe, the two of them could feel that the sense of rejection that had filled Hyanosuke before had dissipated a lot. This could be seen from his acceptance of Hyuga Schwerin. But what should I say? Although they are not on the same team, they do not have no communication due to Konosuke. In daily interactions, Gang Yuanshu's feelings for Hyuga Schwerin and Hyuga Schwerin's secret love for Konosuke are fools. All can be seen clearly. Minato scratched his head. He had always had a good personality and was called a genius, but now he also found it quite difficult. Are they? Looking at the expressions of the two of them, a trace of sadness flashed in Gang Yuanshu's eyes. He and Konosuke have been together for more than a year. Gang Yuansho is not a fool. His feelings are also very keen, not even much worse than Konosuke. Just always have good thoughts. That's really a blessing to them. A hint of bitterness flashed across Gang Yuanshu's lips. He said hello to Minato and the two of them, then turned around and left lonely. Looking at Gang Yuanshu's somewhat lonely back, Minato suddenly smiled bitterly. The happy time is always short-lived. He was seriously injured and almost died. It only took 2 days to recover from the injury. This terrible recovery ability attracted the medical ninjas in the hospital to marvel. The thoughts of the senior figures were more complicated. Or in other words, what kind of value can be reflected in the existence of Konosuke? On the first night after being discharged from the hospital, Konosuke received a short sword from Orochimaru. Konosuke looked at the short sword. The hilt was as black as ink jade, and the blade was about 2 feet long. It shone with cold light and had a faint luster. Just by looking at it, you could feel the sharpness emanating from the blade. It seems to sting people's eyes. Isn't this the pheasant sword? Orochimaru looked at him and said calmly, "You need a sharper weapon." Konosuke silently accepted the short sword, nodded and said, "I just want a knife." This short sword should be a replica of the pheasant sword. Its specifications are suitable for ninjas. It is light, sharp and suitable for carrying. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a sword dedicated to ninjas. It can even be infused with chakra. Simply a murder weapon. The two of them didn't speak again for a moment, and the room suddenly fell silent. After a long time, Orochimaru's unique hoarse voice sounded first. "You can tell me the specifics of that night. Many people want to know how Konosuke killed Tamnu, who is well known in Cloud Shinobi Village, including Orochimaru, because this in itself is an unreasonable thing, even if Orochimaru knew enough about Konosuke. If the opponent's attainments in physical skills and sword skills are not that great, or if the opponent is just a chunin, then many people can reluctantly accept it, but the opponent is Cloud Shinobi Tamnu, whose own physical skills and his sword skills are very powerful, not to mention that he can use the Thunder God's armor to activate the body's cell vitality. Faced with such an enemy, even Konosuke, who has excellent academic performance and rapid progress, cannot do it. Because there is an insurmountable gap between Jonin and Genin, some ninjas may not be able to become Jonin even if they spend their entire lives. So, how can this not be surprising? Orochimaru is very curious. It is precisely because he knows Konosuke's strength that he feels everything is so incredible. For Uncle Snake, who believes that science is the primary productive force, luck and coincidence are all on the sidelines. Facing Orochimaru's probing gaze, Konosuke scratched his head and said, "I seem to have awakened a secret technique that is comparable to the Thunder God's armor." As he spoke, he moved and rushed into the courtyard at a very fast speed. Then there was a flash of sword light. When he came back again in an instant, the flying sakura flower petals in the courtyard suddenly spread out in midair, and an extra one appeared out of thin air. Times the number, but just now Konosuke rushed to the courtyard in an instant and waved the short sword to cut all the fallen sakura flower petals into 2. "Good knife." Orochimaru stared at the courtyard and praised lightly, then looked at Konosuke seriously. He suddenly realized that he could not see through the young man in front of him. "Is your body ready for duty now?" "Okay," Konosuke said slowly. Orochimaru nodded and said, "Then take a good rest tonight." After saying that, he stood up and walked to the corridor, then turned around and returned to the house. But when he glanced back for the last time, the playfulness in his eyes made Konosuke suddenly sweat on his spine. Konosuke watched Orochimaru leave the room, slowly gathered the chakra, took out the short sword and stared at it silently. His eyes were dark, and he didn't know what he was thinking. Huge changes are always hidden in many small things that people ignore and take for granted. It is subtle day after day. When people have become accustomed to its existence, they do not realize that it is completely different from before. During the several missions they performed after returning to the team, Hyuga Schwerin and Gang Yuensho really noticed that Konosuke seemed different from before. During the days of rest after the mission, the young man became more and more fond of enjoying a life of ease, and never went through the rigorous ascetic-like training before. It seems that the whole person has been sublimated to a state, and the arduous external cultivation has been transformed into the inner reflection of the spiritual mood. Orochimaru also noticed this phenomenon, but he had no intention of changing it, because even though Konosuke seemed to neglect his practice at first, his strength was visibly growing every day. This extremely unscientific phenomenon, now Orochimaru is used to it. "Konosuke, what secrets does your body hide?" Orochimaru looked at Konosuke as if he were an untapped treasure, attracting him more and more to find out, but he knew that now was not the time. I will eventually discover the secret hidden in your body. A man like a snake, with a cold heart and cold values. This is Orochimaru. On this day, the sky was hazy. From morning to afternoon, the dark clouds were like fermented dough, slowly swelling and turning dark, pressing towards the earth with a heavy breath, as if it would rain heavily in the next second. Thick rolling dark clouds blocked the sunlight, and the gray sky made people feel gloomy. There was hardly a pedestrian on the street, but Konosuke turned a blind eye and performed a sword dance as slow as Tai Chi in a relatively remote school ground. Since returning from the hospital, he has become more and more fond of this lifestyle of pursuing artistic conception. Snapped. The big raindrops suddenly fell, hitting Konosuke's slightly raised forehead, and exploded into crystal water. Then, more big raindrops fell from the sky, and the blurred space between the sky and the earth was instantly opened. Rain curtain. Rumble. In the darkness of the sky and the earth, lightning was like a snake wandering in the thick clouds, and from time to time it would burst out and tear the sky apart. The rain was pouring down instantly, and the raindrops stung a bit on the exposed skin. For the Fire Nation, which has a good climate and environment, this sudden heavy rain is rare to see for several years. This sword cannot be practiced. In this kind of rain, Konosuke endured the heavy rain, and the faint and transcendent artistic conception just now disappeared. The pretentious appearance in the drizzle and the silly appearance in the pouring rain were two completely different ways of life. The heavy rain is accompanied by cold moisture, which slowly penetrates into the skin as the rainwater. Konosuke frowned slightly, but took back the short sword with a snap, turned around and left without hesitation. The rain showed signs of getting heavier, causing almost all the people in Konoha village to hide in their houses and watch this rare heavy rain. They stared at the heavy rain outside the window and listened to the sound of rain filling their ears, but they did not know, in such heavy rain, there was still a young man who had no time to take shelter and was walking helplessly in the rain. Feeling the deserted road, Konosuke's mood became worse and worse. He wanted to go out and cultivate his sentiment through the drizzle, but he never thought that God would send him a heavy rain to wet the plot. In the hazy rain and fog, he saw a person. Amidst the vast white rain curtain, I don't know when a person was standing. Through the hazy rain curtain, a beautiful and elegant white line was vaguely visible. Even if it rains heavily, Konosuke can still feel the gaze directed at him. Ah, he smiled slightly, but his voice was instantly drowned in the sound of rain. Strong winds, thunder, and heavy rain. This violent storm that had been brewing for a day was neither accidental nor hasty. Raindrops pressed down on his body in clusters, and Konosuke strode out. In a few breaths, he could clearly see the person standing in the rain curtain watching him. Her long black hair dances in the wind, her delicate and elegant face has a pair of pure white eyes, a little red lips, and she wears a white kimono embroidered with a hint of hyacinth. Everything is so light, yet stunningly beautiful, even if she is the wind was strong, and Konosuke seemed to smell the faint fragrance like a landscape painting. The umbrella was handed over slowly, and the next moment it seemed that the rainstorm had disappeared, and it seemed like there were only two people left in the whole world. You came just in time. Then, why not come together? She smiled faintly, with only pure happiness. Seeing such a smile, Konosuke couldn't help but laugh too. When I first came to Konoha, everything was strange. Strange people, strange environment. He does not belong to this world, and the world does not belong to him either. He deliberately kept a distance from everything and regarded everything as a game. Until today, he discovered that the sun is still warm and the rain is still cold. This world is so real that some people are alive. This is not an anime, but a real world. I will live a good life here from now on, Konosuke. He said to himself in his heart. Rumble. There was a loud sound of wind and rain. The sound of rain filled my ears. The raindrops that kept falling to the top of the head disappeared in front of my eyes. An umbrella that was still strong in such rain covered the heavy rain. There was a loud sound of wind and rain outside, but it was extremely quiet inside the umbrella, like a peaceful harbor. Konosuke silently stared at the fair and pretty face in front of him. I am willing to be your umbrella. What if it's sunny? Hyuga whispered quietly. The sun is too bright and can burn your skin. Amidst the heavy rain, Hyuga Schwerin heard all the deep voices. The two looked at each other and smiled, saying nothing. Konoha 38 years. After such a long time, World War II is finally coming to an end. Before Konoha could take a breather after defeating Rain Shinobi Village and Sand Ninja, it faced Cloud Shinobi again. However, the difference was that due to some reasons, Konoha lost some advantage and started a long tug of war with Cloud Shinobi. War. As we all know, Konoha during the 4th Hokage period was in the interlude of the 2nd-3rd Ninja War. Due to Konoha's excellent ninja training system, a large number of excellent ninjas emerge in an endless stream. The Mesozoic ninjas, represented by Sannin and White Fang, experienced the Second Ninja War and existed as the pillars of that year. The talents of the younger generation of young ninjas also began to show their talents. This period was also called the Golden Age of Konoha. In the Golden Age, Konoha's combat power was also at its strongest. For Sand Ninja, the battle between Rock Shinobi and Cloud Shinobi also continued to win, and the White Fang, who had just passed away, was famous in Konoha at that time. At that time, the White Fang was an absolutely ruthless killer, killing all enemies regardless of whether they were men, women, old or young. Some enemy ninja villages even announced that they could abandon the mission if they encountered Konoha's White Fang. But a certain battle against the Sand Ninja changed the White Fang. At that time, on the battlefield between Konoha and the Sand Ninja, a Sand Ninja couple using puppets did not run away when they were at an absolute numerical disadvantage. Instead, they used puppets and some kind of chakra shield to tenaciously protect a certain base of the Sand Ninjas. White Fang identified this place as an important Sand Ninja stronghold, and as the frontline commander, he ordered a storm here. The battle finally ended. White Fang and Tenzen, whose medical ninjutsu was no less than Tsunade at the time, killed the Sand Ninja couple. But they discovered that it was only a baby that the couple had maintained in a protective posture even after death. This child became the Red Scorpion of the Sand. White Fang was shocked. He seemed to think of his newly born son. For the first time, the White Fang failed to kill all. He also realized that ninjas are not just tools for killing. The peace did not last long, and then the battle with Cloud Shinobi began. This is also the last battle of Konoha's White Fang's life. The White Fang team, which underestimated Cloud Shinobi's strength, got into a tough fight after stealing Cloud Shinobi's confidential documents. Two teammates were captured. Tianshan and White Fang, who were seriously injured, were besieged by Cloud Shinobi. Tianshan asked White Fang to break out with the documents. However, in the end, the White Fang used its own strategy to use the confidential document as a bargaining chip to obtain the safe retreat of all members. Tactically speaking, the White Fang's strategy was impeccable, but that document was too important to Konoha, and it was lost. Konoha's temporary tactical advantage over Cloud Shinobi was also lost, and Konoha and Cloud Shinobi entered a long-lasting tug of war. These are the plots that Konosuke knew in his previous life, and they are also the background of the current war period. After a long period of cross-server battles, Konoha is already a little exhausted, so much so that some new generation ninjas are about to be sent to the battlefield. War is the best way to temper people, but Orochimaru doesn't lead the team much anymore. He would usually issue relevant tasks and leave it to Konosuke's team to complete alone. This makes the overall strength of their team grow more and more, including personal strength, ideological awareness and team cooperation. Orochimaru, who now felt that Konosuke's team was cooperating well, finally made up his mind, released the mission form, and began to send the team to the battlefield. Entering the battlefield together are other classmates who graduated at the same time, which means that the new generation of Konoha has finally begun to face the real world and welcome the baptism of blood and war. This is the first time we meet. My name is Shinobi, please give me some advice. Facing the surprised look of a certain Cloud Shinobi, someone greeted him politely, and without hesitation put the ninja sword into the other person's arms, while keeping his hands clear. Stop, grab the opponent's ninja tool bag, and then a faint light flashes, directly sacrificing the body. The entire set of movements was extremely skillful, without any sloppiness, as if it had been trained countless times. War is indeed the most beautiful place for people to grow. Someone took out the emergency marching rations from the opponent's ninja bag, while eating and quickly recovering blood. Looking at the clean local battlefield he was responsible for, he jumped and quickly disappeared into the shadows of the dense forest. The newly graduated rookies were brought into the battlefield one after another by their teachers. Different from other teams, two of the teams did not have a teacher, that is Team Konosuke and Team Minato. They seemed to be left to fend for themselves. Destruction's free-range choice actually shows Orochimaru and Jiraiya's full confidence in them. Unlike other ninja troops, even if these genin enter the battlefield, they will only be assigned some safer tasks such as exploration, clearing traps, and mopping up. Even so, when genin enters the battlefield during the war, he usually has a narrow escape from death, because no matter what, the battlefield is a battlefield, and a slight negligence can be fatal. Therefore, hugging each other for warmth became the only option for the two teams, especially when the Minato team was missing Kushina. As the special existence of Nine Tails Jinchuriki, it was a deterrent. No one was stupid enough to send Jinchuriki at such a time. On the battlefield. Even so, Konosuke is at home like a duck in water. This battlefield in the low-end area, which is not very difficult, is almost tailor-made for him. With Galen's strong endurance, as long as he has enough food, he is almost immortal. Body. As we all know, Garen, who did not need to return to the city to replenish blood in the early laning, has achieved greater growth than other heroes. Often when other heroes return to the city to replenish equipment, he has already reached level 6. Chirp, chirp, chirp. A rapid and rhythmic bird song appeared in an empty jungle somewhere. Then, the grass moved slightly somewhere, and black shadows gathered on a huge stone under the big tree. Actually, you don't need to make a secret signal, I can also detect your existence. Veins popped up around Hyuga Schweren's eyes, as if telling a fact. Personally, I think this kind of chirping is actually more likely to attract enemy ninjas. Konosuke turns a deaf ear to this. So what? Do you want me to say that cave monsters, etc. are considered normal? This kind of bird call is crisp and natural, full of penetration, but it can fully reflect the versatility of the ninja itself, isn't it good? As for the gathering of ninjas, it would be most interesting to add this special code. Then his eyes briefly glanced at Hyuga Schweren, Gang Yuensho, Namikaze Minato, and Senjoichi. Okay, everyone is here. We are the rear area of the Konoha War Zone, a temporary 5-man special mobile team. This is the rear area where Konoha fights against Cloud Shinobi on the border, and as rookies, this is the perfect place. After all, no matter how cruel the war is, they will not let the next generation of new generations be used as cannon fodder. The area has been cleared. The same goes for us there. Several people were sitting next to the gray stone to recover their strength while making a rough report. Their mission is to serve as general auxiliaries, detecting small local ninja troops that have accidentally escaped into the rear of the battlefield, and then reporting to the dedicated elite Jonin team in the rear to eliminate them in a timely manner to protect the secrecy of the rear areas of their own battlefield. After all, in the later stages of the war, especially the stalemate period of the war, whoever can successfully find the local rear logistics department is equivalent to mastering the opponent's lifeline, and then there is no need to fight this battle. Therefore, this place, which is strictly protected, including this kind of task, is perfect for these fledgling rookies to practice. At this time, it is extremely important to have a good pair of eyes. Discover enemy situations in time and report them promptly. It's said to be carrying out battlefield support work, but it's actually not much different from cleaning up the mess. Quote. For Konosuke, who has already adapted, this kind of intensity is not as good as following Orochimaru to perform missions to further train himself. Although this is a battlefield, it usually happens the people here are genin and his like who were dispersed by the main force and fled. Even if he was given sacrifice points, they were very few. Now that the second life star is about to be successfully fused, he needs stronger enemies. At first, he expected to encounter the enemies Naka Jonin and his like who came to investigate. However, after a period of fighting, he discovered that those strong men would be discovered by the elite troops and quickly eliminated as soon as they appeared. It's not his turn. During the war, every distribution was reasonably planned, but I agree more with your proposal. After experiencing the baptism of war, Minato lost his tenderness, and his face, which was originally like a warm sun, was even more delineated by gunpowder smoke. It provides a hint of style for the purpose of the future 4th generation. At this time, his eyes were more eager to try. Why don't we go deeper? It won't be too far. This is our war zone in Konoha. Even if we encounter powerful ninjas, it won't be a problem to escape. Konosuke suggested with his eyes shining. After all, this is the basis for showing off in the future. In the future, Kakashi may introduce himself to 12 Xiaoqiang. This is Konosuke-sama who experienced World War II and shone brightly in the war. He was a character from the same period as 4th generation. Strength cannot be underestimated. Thinking of this, someone couldn't help but feel impatient. This is not good, Gang Yuensho said nonchalantly. Although his words were a little hesitant, his eyes that were constantly shining were very similar to some girls who said they didn't want it but really wanted it in their hearts. It seems that his improvement during this period has been huge. Although Qian Chengyi said nothing, the eagerness in his eyes showed his attitude. Young people are always like this. When they achieve a little success, their hearts will expand infinitely, as if they feel that Laozi is the best in the world and Laozi can do anything. So, Schwerin, what's your opinion? Regarding Hyuga Schwerin, Konosuke did not dare to ignore it easily. The long-term relationship made him understand very well how terrifying this elegant and easygoing girl is when she is guilty. Of course I listen to you. The girl smiled softly, giving someone enough face. Then, everyone, let's get a little closer to the front line. Konosuke reached out and pointed in a certain direction, especially high-spirited. However, he didn't know that their decision would lead them in an extremely dangerous direction, and then inexplicably gain their reputation as heroes. Who could have imagined that the long World War II would soon end in the hands of these young people? In a military tent somewhere on the front line, Jiraiya and Orochimaru sat opposite each other. But I don't know what is happening to our lovely disciples now. Are they still full of resentment because they were irresponsibly abandoned by their teacher? Jiraiya initially felt sorry for Orochimaru, who abandoned his disciples and left them to their own devices. The suggestion of self-destruction was quite dissatisfying, so the disciples naturally had to take him with them when they went to the battlefield. Hearing Jiraiya's mocking words, which seemed to be complaining, Orochimaru said indifferently, with their strength, they are not worthy of standing here. Only the incompetent will complain about the injustice of the world. This sentence was extremely vicious, with a double meaning. Orochimaru, are you mocking me? Jiraiya rolled his eyes helplessly, but he agreed with Orochimaru's words in his heart. It was precisely because of this that he made his own decision like Orochimaru. After all, geniuses always have their own opinions. How can an eagle that can never leave its nest soar in the sky? After calming down, their words couldn't help but focus on the current war again. Is that plan really feasible? You just need to know that the long war is finally coming to an end. Orochimaru's face remained cold, but his words revealed an extremely positive meaning. Yes, it is finally over. This war has caused too much damage to people. Jiraiya sighed, but then thought of something else, and said with some worry, but I always feel. Orochimaru said solemnly, this is the result of the discussion between the three of us. Everyone's task is extremely important. Jiraiya, put away your womanly kindness and indecisiveness. Compared with the damage caused by the long war, these are nothing. What? Then he paused and said, you just need to know that the war is about to end. Jiraiya looked stunned for a moment, then relieved, with a firm look in his eyes, and murmured, yes, the war is about to end. At the same time, inside the Cloud Shinobi village tent, pieces of information about the front line are constantly coming. Information, Konoha, conspiracy, discover, traces. Konoha's plan to destroy Cloud Shinobi. A gasp sounded in the tent, but it was extremely clear. What is Konoha plotting? Continue to send orders to keep an eye on Konoha's Tsunade. As the strongest medical ninja who has emerged recently, the appearance of her and her medical team must be accompanied by a large number of wounded. If we find the place where she often hangs out, then Konoha's rear military base will be found. The war has gone on for so long, and the village has already been overwhelmed. If the rear of Konoha is defeated, the war will basically be over. But as an important medical ninja in Konoha, how could he be discovered so easily? This is information that our team obtained at great cost. It's not wrong to be cautious. If we continue to inquire, if the authenticity of the information is confirmed, victory is just around the corner. It was while the two parties were plotting that no one noticed that a 5-man squadron that was supposed to be mopping up the rear was silently and steadily marching towards the frontline border. The dense jungle gradually became sparse, and beyond that was the open plain, and even the field of vision began to slowly brighten. The enemy situation has been discovered, the team at the front. Hyuga Schweren's eyes opened slightly, with a solemn look on his face. Due to being too deep in the battle line, enemy ninjas appeared more and more frequently. It was already too much for her to keep her eyes open. However, her tired face still showed a tenacious fighting spirit. This is an adaptation brought to her by the baptism of war, a belief that she wants to keep winning. In this way, although she did not realize that the detection range had been greatly reduced until the enemy ninja arrived in front of her, she was still not worried because that person existed. Sure enough, before she could finish speaking, Konosuke pulled out a shuriken from the ninja tool bag with his right hand at an extremely fast speed. He relied on his body's instinct and threw the shuriken away without hesitation, without even observing it carefully. Towards a certain direction in the dense forest. Puff! The sound of a sharp blade piercing flesh was heard, and Cloud Shinobi, who was holding a kunai in his hand, never understood until his death why he, who was hiding in the bushes and waiting for a sneak attack, was killed just before the attack. The woman from the Hyuga tribe had just discovered, isn't he? It's a little late. Konosuke's face was filled with a soft smile, but it was different from Minato's smile that was as warm and refreshing as the sun. It was like a group of taunts, and the joke on the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. He was just a rookie who had just entered the battlefield. He seemed to have the temperament of a veteran, with an ironic confidence on his face. Be on guard, everyone. Konosuke casually pulled out a kunai again, and figures sprang out from around them, surrounding them. Konosuke turned his head and glanced at Hyuga Schweren, who had a tired look on his pretty face, and the others who had more or less scars on their bodies, and said with a smile, "You can leave after finishing this vote." Unknowingly, they had gone deep into the battle line and strayed far away from the rear. Now among the many enemy ninjas they encountered, they were no longer fledgling rookies on the battlefield fleeing in panic, but also a powerful team composed of many genin and even chunin. This kind of enemy is completely different from the previous one in terms of team composition, equipment and quality. However, due to the presence of Konosuke and Minato, their side has an overwhelming advantage. In just a few days, this team has slaughtered multiple times of their opponents. After all, this is not the front line of the war. Most of the Cloud Shinobi teams are led by chunin. Occasionally, there will be those who are not afraid of death, such as Konosuke. They are usually composed entirely of genin, and are a team specifically responsible for exploring enemy areas and finding enemies. Although this is mostly the case in Konoha, but the difference in maximum combat power makes everything fall into a one-sided situation. Under the leadership of Konosuke and Minato, coupled with the team's perfection, the group of people could hardly meet any opponent who could compete with them. Not to mention Konosuke, who had already surpassed chunin, even Hyuga Schweren and the three of them were almost alone. With chunin's strength, after several days of training, the strength of these people has increased rapidly, and they have almost formed their own fighting method. Such a high-intensity war caused a certain amount of damage to this team within a few days, but it was all worth it. The experience gained by everyone through a certain high-intensity war gradually transformed their own temperament from the inside out. What the group of rookies who were still playing Minesweeper games with the leading teachers in the rear areas couldn't get was a qualitative change. Konosuke uses his strong physique and superb sword skills to definitely hold back the main force of the place and attack them, like a MT. The battle to find enemies is left to the supercilious Hyuga Schweren. The main combat force is undoubtedly the fastest and strongest Minato, coupled with the powerful and wretched output gang Motosho. The main support is generally like a big nanny with medical attributes. City 1. With this kind of cooperation, as long as the opponent is not the extremely powerful Jonin, they can almost walk sideways on this map. So, that's exactly what happened. Compared to them, the other side was just a bunch of rookies who could only give away their lives. After a few days of battlefield career, Minato's fighting skills have obviously become more and more familiar, and his style has begun to lean towards more effective one-hit kills. Now he is getting closer and closer to the golden flash of the future. However, others don't have Konosuke's pervert physique and Minato's almost harmless fighting skills. Ninjas always pay attention to teamwork. Those who rely solely on their own strength to steal the show and don't consider their teammates are simply useless. Please give me more advice. He said this, and then inserted and pulled out the kunai from the opponent's fatal position with a smile. The expressions on the other person's face, ranging from astonishment to pain, all reflect the person's bad character. Ah, are you clear and clean? Konosuke calmly grabbed the opponent's ninja bag, then stretched out his palm, and the opponent instantly turned into tiny points of light and disappeared. Feeling the feeling coming from the second life star, it was like a strong heartbeat, almost leaving the body. Are you so impatient? The sacrifice points are about to be replenished, and you are about to appear. The ominous blade Katarina. The hardships and huge opportunities on the battlefield resulted in the rapid fusion of the second destiny star. Konosuke naturally understood that once the fusion of this destiny star was successful, he would crisscross the entire battlefield like Minato in the later period, coming and going freely. Where have everyone gone? Sure enough, have you stretched the battle line too far? Konosuke turned around and looked around, only to find that not only the enemies, but also Minato and others were missing. At the beginning, several people were still cooperating, but as the battle continued, Konosuke, for some purpose, gradually pulled the opponent who seemed to contribute more points out of the battlefield, and fought farther and farther until he disappeared from everyone. Out of sight. With Konosuke's current strength, it is already very easy to deal with the likes of Genin Chunin. As long as there are not excessive numbers of people or the appearance of Jonin, it is very easy to ensure no injuries. But he never swelled directly because of it. You must know that this is a battlefield, not a one-on-one ninja duel. Accidents definitely happen from time to time, because you don't know when a kunai will fly in without warning, and your life will be ended before you can react. The chaotic and disordered battlefield can easily harvest even Jonin's life. There are even reports specifically stating that most ninjas died not from enemies on the battlefield, but from accidents. Therefore, it is very important to remain vigilant on the battlefield. Even if it is a place you have just explored before, it is not surprising if a detonating talisman or something suddenly appears in the next moment, because everyone on this battlefield will rack their brains to win. Soon, the battle on Konosuke's side once again attracted a group of Cloud Shinobi, a temporary team composed of 1 Chunin and 3 Genin, which silently began to approach their location. During this period, Minato and the others just finished fighting. Coincidentally, Konosuke, who had not yet joined Minato and the others, happened to be alone at this time. Feeling the hostility approaching, Konosuke raised his eyebrows and asked, "Is there another one?" Enemy ninjas have appeared more and more frequently in recent days, and situations like this happen from time to time. Although Shinosuke spoke lightly, his face became more and more serious. He found that something was wrong, and felt that some kind of conspiracy was approaching. This might not come from Cloud Shinobi, but from behind them, Mu Leaf. Finally, one of the Genin who was approaching chose what he thought was the best time. After pulling out his kunai, he felt that he had found a flaw in Konosuke, who had flaws all over his body. Then he rushed towards the target with great arrogance, and almost at the same time in an instant, other ninjas followed this Cloud Shinobi and rushed out quickly. Are all the people in Cloud Shinobi village so restless? Someone turned around lightly, dodged the extremely fast blow of the Cloud Shinobi, and casually pulled out the ninja sword given to him by Orochimaru. However, while turning around, with the power of the spin, the blade drew a strange trace. The trajectory hurriedly passed between the neck of a Genin who was coming forward. Poof! The bright crimson color was like the unfolding of a gorgeous feast, and blood was everywhere, splashing between the surprised Cloud Shinobi and the indifferent Konosuke. Are you ready to enjoy the flowers? Everyone, my sword is already thirsty. Someone said this lightly, but without any pyrotechnics. The surprise only lasted for a very short time on the faces of the Cloud Shinobi, and then anger and more crazy fighting spirit became dominant. The Cloud Shinobi's movements only paused slightly, and then rushed forward again. Ding! Standing up and wielding the sword, Konosuke easily diffused another attack from the opponent. Not only that, but with the clever opportunity of being surrounded by Cloud Shinobi, someone swung the blade, but the person suddenly spun around. Hipposasia. Flow of joy. A high imitation version of Revolving Heaven. It's so cool to say the name loudly when you use the move. For a moment, a certain person felt that he was full of strength, and his whole body was spinning like a top, catching all the cloud shinobi who were unable to react by surprise. This trick will make you dizzy if you do it too often. I don't use it often, so if you were lucky enough to see this, you should be able to rest in peace. Cloud Shinobi's screams were mixed with someone's shameless low-pitched teasing, mixed with the sharp weapon. The sound of flesh being cut suddenly became the main theme of this battlefield. A moment later, someone who felt severely dizzy after using the skill looked at the stumps and broken arms on the ground, and felt more and more like vomiting. He was so handsome just now. Forget it, let's meet up with Minato and the others first. Someone quickened their pace. When they arrived at the battlefield, Minato and the others had just finished the battle. They were sitting aside to take a rest. They were not surprised by Kinosuke's arrival, so they said hello hastily and continued. Everyone is doing their own thing. After all, this is not the first time that someone has disappeared after being slapped. No one is stupid. Everyone has some secrets of their own. Even if Kinosuke doesn't tell them, they don't ask. At least this guy is a very trustworthy teammate, right? Ah, it seems that you have been through quite a war. Hinosuke looked at the embarrassed people and teased. He gently picked up a blue hairband and walked over to help Hyuga. Tie lightly. Hyuga meekly lowered his head and let him fiddle with his long hair clumsily. Under the headband, a unique mark reflected in Kinosuke's eyes, deeply piercing his nerves. Caged bird. In the girl, he seemed to see the future Neji. Kinosuke was a little silent. Since he accepted Hyuga Schwerin, he would never allow Neji's tragedy to happen to her. Now he is not the unknown dragon armor in the plot, but Orochimaru's adopted son. Orochimaru's adopted son, and, well, apart from being the adopted son of Orochimaru, he doesn't seem to have anything to offer. But these are not important, right? With Cheat, his growth has now attracted the attention of Konoha's high-level officials. He is the backbone of the new generation and the leader among Minato and others. Future achievements are limitless, and Kinosuke even has a feeling that if he works hard enough, he might be able to snatch up the future fourth Hokage. Yes, these all sound tempting, but in the end this is just Kinosuke's own imagination. After all, he was not born into a wealthy family. The Hyuga clan is one of the largest wealthy families in Konoha, and more than 10 years later, after a Konoha clan with the second highest disease in the entire clan is wiped out overnight, they will even become the largest clan in Konoha. Such power is unfathomable. Testing, coupled with the stubborn feudal ideology within the clan. It seems that intermarriage between foreign races is prohibited. Thinking of this, Kinosuke couldn't help but feel a headache. If the goal he had to work hard for before was to return to Earth, then now this goal is to rescue Hyuga Schwerin from his dire position in the Hyuga branch house. After all, anyone who has watched the plot of Hokage knows very well how nonsense the branch house system established by Hyuga is. While Kinosuke was thinking, a beam of light blue energy that looked like white energy rushed out of the dense forest without any warning, and instantly stabbed Hyuga Schwerin, who was sitting down with his head bowed. Amid the surprised gazes, Hyuga's eyes widened, blood spurted out from the corner of his mouth, and he slowly lay down. Boom! Almost at the same time, a deadly black shadow fell from the sky. The dazzling reflection reflected in Shinobi's pupils, Cloud Shinobi's forehead protector. And there is no doubt that the blue brilliance shining all over is the symbol of the Thunder God's armor. It's actually a Jonin. With such Jonin's strength, coupled with the shameless sneak attack, Kinosuke had no chance of surviving. Puff! The palm flashing with lightning went straight through Kinosuke's chest. The terrible impact even completely destroyed the outline of the chest and almost broke it. The fragile neck bones were obviously unable to withstand such a heavy blow, and it became unnatural in just a moment. Twist to one side. Minato and others on the side stared wide-eyed. No one expected that in just a moment. The change in painting style is sudden and unusual, but it is a bit unacceptable. How? How? Chapter 31. Jonin's great strength was clearly revealed at this moment. Chi, this kid reacts so fast. You guys, catch them. However, in the flash of smoke, Jonin looked at the wood pierced by his palm and the bloodlines on the ground, with a playful smile on his lips. Following an order, several black shadows sprang out and tracked in the direction of bloodline, but this Jonin turned his head and looked at Minato and the others who were facing a formidable enemy. Sure enough, there is Konoha's genin here. Jonin raised his head and chuckled, but the figure that was still there suddenly disappeared into the air. "Be careful," Minato exclaimed, but it was too late. When Jonin appeared again, Senjoichi was already firmly in his hands. "Kids, what mission are you on?" Jonin was so powerful that he started interrogating Minato as if he didn't exist. However, Minato knew that if they made any move, what would the other party see? The seemingly defenseless body will activate quickly, giving them a devastating blow. Qian Chengyi struggled hard and wanted to resist, but for some reason, when he looked into the other person's eyes, his mind felt dizzy for no reason, his vision slowly blurred, and there seemed to be only a low voice in his ears, "What's the mission?" "Mission?" Qian Chengyi was a little confused for a moment. "Yes." A ferocious smile appeared on Jonin's lips, and he continued to ask, "The mission assigned by your superiors?" Looking at Senjoichi's current state, Minato frowned and was extremely surprised. What a powerful illusion. I didn't expect that this Jonin was actually a powerful torturer despite his powerful strength. He looked solemn. He calmly took out a strange kunai with a magic spell engraved on the handle from his pocket. "Please, we must succeed this time." At this time, the confused Senjoichi finally remembered something and murmured, "The mission. The mission is to detect and eliminate the enemy ninjas who broke into Konoha's rear base, and to protect the location of my base from being leaked." A hint of joy suddenly flashed in the Jonin's eyes, but he laughed and said, "Sure enough. This is indeed Konoha's rear base." He seemed to have misunderstood something. Now, seeing that the other party relaxed his vigilance in surprise, Minato took advantage of this opportunity and threw out the kunai. Jonin naturally caught Minato's movements from the corner of his eye, but he didn't take it seriously. He put down Senjoichi and stretched out his hand, blocking the path where kunai must pass. "Madness," he said disdainfully. However, the next moment, a sudden scene made him widen his eyes in shock and he couldn't believe his eyes. A yellow flash suddenly appeared, and then flashed again, and the three little ghosts in front of him disappeared without a trace. This technique. Jonin was stunned for a moment, and then a hint of ferocity appeared on his face again. "Kid, none of you can run away." A figure came in front of him. "Go back and tell me that I have found Konoha's rear base and can march now," Jonin said, and the black shadow rushed into the jungle again. "The war is about to end." The low voice was accompanied by the sunlight. Cloud Shinobi's forehead protector flashed a cold metallic luster on his forehead, but gradually fell silent in the jungle. In the jungle, Konosuke held Hyuga in his arms and kept jumping on the branches. The branches that were constantly being stepped on and broken also represented his anxious mood at this time. When Hyuga Schwerin was hit by the light, Konosuke was nearby. Due to his long-term physical instinct, he saved Hyuga Schwerin's life, allowing her to avoid the fatal blow originally aimed at the heart. But although her life was saved, her injuries were still serious and she was in urgent need of treatment. Suddenly, Konosuke frowned, and raised his free left hand instantly. He used his strength to spin the two shurikens and shoot them backwards. They whirled half a circle in the air, but they turned around with a subtle movement. The position flew behind him, but there was no one there, and he saw that the two shurikens were about to fall and be nailed to the tree trunk. But suddenly several black shadows suddenly appeared. Ding! Ding! The shuriken accurately shot at three of the black shadows, but without any surprise, it was blocked by the kunai and flew directly to the side. Although this kind of prejudgment throw is extremely exquisite, no one can do it with a few tricks. Sword. If you really want to use this to hurt people, it's not enough. However, Konosuke's purpose was not to compare, and his purpose was only to block those people for a moment. The previous Jonin's attack was so intense that no one had any time to breathe and adapt. As for leaving Minato and the other three behind, he could escape on his own, which was non-existent. Because he believes in Minato, little Taiyang has now learned the Flying Thunder God technique of second generation. Although he is not very skilled, he is more than enough to seize the opportunity and take Gang Yuensho and the two to escape, and his mission is to lure away some of the necessary people. Strength, increasing the chances of Minato and others escaping. Three of the several Chunin behind him slowed down slightly due to the interference of the shuriken, but the last one rushed forward without slowing down at all. Perhaps in his opinion, Konosuke, who was running away with someone in his arms, was actually it is undoubtedly the same as the lost dog. With great speed, he quickly passed by Konosuke and swung a ninja sword in his hand. You are a rookie in Konoha who can only use kunai. I'm afraid you haven't touched a ninja sword yet. He thought to himself and turned his head, but before his smile could fully appear on his face, he saw the young man's calm profile. Then the exclamations and alarms of his companions behind him suddenly sounded. Before he could fully react, he only felt a sudden pain in his back, and his entire vision began to blur. This boy is so fast with the knife. How on earth did he do it? With this question in his mind, this cloud shinobi's Chunin slowly closed his eyes and fell downwards. One has been solved. A trace of ridicule appeared at the corner of Konosuke's mouth, and he hurriedly put away the ninja sword turned in his hand. At the same time, he sighed in his heart, another poor man who sacrificed his life for his arrogance. The 3 cloud shinobi who followed were completely shocked. What they saw was that the teammate with the best swordsmanship among the 4 was killed by a mere Konoha genin, and the Konoha boy was like this. His sword skills were crisp and sophisticated, and the 3 of them didn't even notice when he drew the sword. What a fast swordsmanship! The 3 people sighed in their hearts. It was like an illusion. To them, the boy's movements seemed to be a little faster. This is really troublesome. However, what they still don't know is that someone who has already launched a fatal blow is secretly curling his lips at this moment. This skill is a bit of a waste if used. If Shui Ran hadn't still been in his arms, and if he hadn't been in such a hurry, he might have turned back immediately and fought 300 rounds with the 2 cloud shinobi who were in hot pursuit. However, reason told Konosuke that he could not do this because Hyuga was seriously injured and needed medical treatment. He could not waste too much time, and he must remember that there are not only 2 Chunin here. If time goes on, the shameless one will probably, Jonin, who doesn't care about his reputation but wants to launch a sneak attack, is very likely to catch up. Konosuke. Hyuga suddenly woke up in his arms. Ah, Schwerin, you're awake. How do you feel? Konosuke kept walking and tapped lightly on the branches, but always kept the stability in his arms. Hyuga's snowy and beautiful face is slightly pale, and the trace of bloodline at the corner of her mouth contrasts with the snow-white skin, but it reveals a touch of sadness. There was a complicated and inexplicable look in her eyes, some of which were unwillingness, some of which was desolate, but more of it was a hint of happiness. After a long time, her eyes gradually became firmer, as if she had made up her mind. Konosuke, please let me go and go alone. You. Konosuke's body trembled suddenly and he lowered his head. The sound of branches breaking represented his state of mind at this time. Girl, don't raise the flag randomly. You might become a prophet if you do this. In other words, do I look like someone who left his girlfriend and ran away alone? Slowly, someone raised his head. What Hyuga Schwerin saw was not the sunny smile full of reassurance, nor the sorrow of life and death. Someone said with a serious face, Shui Ran, when the war is over, go back to your hometown and get married. As soon as these words came out, both of them were stunned. Hyuga looked at Konosuke blankly, his pale face turned red for no reason, but he just hugged him and said nothing. But Shinosuke's heart was filled with huge waves. I didn't mean to say this, why did I just say this sentence out of my mouth? Heaven is going to destroy our great Chin. It seems that this time the odds are much worse. Feeling the girl's arms getting tighter and tighter, Shinosuke was on the verge of crying. While he was still in the air, he turned over and jumped, kicking Cloud Shinobi who was coming to kill him. With the help of this recoil, he rushed to the side more quickly, and smoothly a lot of kunai was sprinkled. Chasing your sister, Lousy is very annoyed now. Get out of here, or I'll beat you to death. However, perhaps due to distraction, Shinosuke did not notice that one of the Cloud Shinobi who intercepted him was missing. Asshole. A big net came with a hood over his head. Someone dodged and crossed to the side, narrowly escaping. Did you take advantage of that guy's harassment and go around to the front? Looking at the figure passing by, Konosuke understood clearly. However, the next moment, he clearly saw the malicious smile on Cloud Shinobi's face as he passed by. Smile, sister. Konosuke's heart trembled inexplicably at his smile, and then the soles of his feet hurt, and he couldn't help but want to curse. Despicable and shameless stupid X, I. Shinosuke greeted this direct woman from Cloud Shinobi for 18 generations back in an instant. My uncle actually placed iron thorns on another tree, and the iron thorns were an iron thorn, and it also has an undercut. The right foot that had been forcibly pulled out was already in terrible shape, and cold sweat was pouring from his forehead. As for the injuries in other places, it would be over with patience, but Laozi's feet were very sensitive. Even though the impregnable Sanhua was still afraid of being spanked. If he hadn't devoted himself to the cultivation of spiritual power recently, I'm afraid Kinnisuke would have jumped right away. It's really unlucky, and it would be even more tragic if it was poisoned. Hyuga Schwerin, who was in his arms, was too seriously injured and had already passed out. After all the tossing, he didn't react. Fortunately, he didn't see his current embarrassment. Uncle, this time the boat capsized in the gutter. If it weren't for the bonus effect of the critical hit just now, the other Chunin would be left far behind, and Kinnisuke would probably be in danger now. But even in this situation, if the current predicament is not solved in time, there is still no advantage at all. The three Chunin on the other side didn't give Shinosuke much chance to breathe. As soon as the sneak attack ended, the three people wearing obvious Cloud Shinobi costumes chased after them crazily. According to the current state of one being unconscious and one being seriously injured, it was really a series of attacks. Escape is impossible. TCH, were you cornered so quickly? Looking at Hyuga Schwerin, who was still bleeding from the wound, Kinnisuke couldn't help but smile helplessly, and then his eyes became more determined. This time, he must let her live no matter what. Let's end the war first. Kinnisuke quickly carried Hyuga Schwerin behind him, and two kunai appeared in his hands almost at the same time. He sighed and calmed down his mind a little. With a thought in his mind, crimson light gradually appeared and slowly covered the two kunai. Although the second life star had not yet been fused, even if paying sacrifice points only allows you to use skills bluntly, but judging from the current situation, there is no hope for a plot in which someone can provide timely support in a difficult situation, and everything has to be relied on by oneself. This is clearly within the scope of Konoha's war, but our team has hardly seen any traces of Konoha shinobi in the past few days. On the contrary, the ninjas in Cloud Shinobi Village are active and frequent. So it seems that they are still dreaming about reinforcements from Konoha. Don't you have any ideas in mind? If I don't take advantage of it, I'm afraid it will really be in danger. With his eyes closed and without even a seal, Kinnisuke's hands hung quietly on both sides of his body, as if he had given up resistance. However, if people who are familiar with him are present, they will find that Kinnisuke is desperate. Projectile blade. Launch. A kunai was shot out from Shiji's assistant, and it moved forward quickly, but it seemed to have entered a special space. It disappeared and appeared, making it difficult to see the trajectory. A Cloud Shinobi couldn't dodge in time and was suddenly shot by a kunai. And suddenly a large piece of blood mist spurted out, which seemed to be filled with unknown energy. Ordinary kunai would never achieve this effect. However, this is not the end yet. After hitting a Cloud Shinobi with the kunai, his power remained unchanged, but it seemed to be alive. It seemed that there was an invisible hand holding the rules, and it actually bounced again. In a flash, instantly flying towards another Cloud Shinobi, the other two were caught off guard and stabbed by kunai one after another. It wasn't until it bounced twice that the crimson light on the kunai slowly faded and disappeared, and finally turned into an ordinary kunai again, but it still retained its power and nailed it with a thud. On the tree trunk on the side. Yes, this is the power of the ominous blade Katarina brought by Kinnisuke's second destiny star. That crimson spatial ability. Speaking of which, Kinnisuke has not completely integrated the second life star at all. So according to Kinnisuke's character, this kind of unique skill will only be triggered when the two sides are forced to fight. This seemingly awesome and cool attack method must be paid before it can be used. That's right, Kinnisuke, who has not yet fully integrated, uses these energies just like refueling a car. Although he can continue to use that special energy as long as he has enough points, the price of gas is too expensive. He has not yet fully integrated with Catalina's life star. It is too rigid to use these skills. He can only use them mechanically. It is different from Galen's ability, which is so easy to use at his fingertips. Moreover, there is another point. His current physique is not enough to resist high loads generated by long space jumps. He had already discovered this after the attack on Kushina and the successful attack on Jonin. He relied on this energy to teleport within a range like the Minato flying thunder god. Not only did it consume a huge amount of energy, but at the same time, that the strong feeling of repulsion that penetrates the space will get worse every minute and every second. If this mud horse is used for a long time, it will be really unreasonable if it is not dead. So, in the final analysis, the ultimate move is not something that can be released just like in the game. The strong tearing feeling on the body once directly made him swear that he would never fully integrate the second life star. Use this ability easily. And according to the rules of skills that have not yet been integrated, once you start using a certain skill, there is no way to stop it at will. On the other hand, once you start to jump in space, even if Kinosuke's body cannot bear it, you cannot stop it at will. But now, the severity of the situation forced him to make a choice. That's all, let's do it again. It's not that you can't try short-distance shunpo, it's just that, traveling through space involves unimaginable pain. By the way, the 3 people who were stabbed by kunai before showed shocked expressions. 2 of them were seriously injured, and 1 of them was fatal in one move, but the last Cloud Shinobi reacted when kunai jumped for the second time, instantly turned into smoke, leaving only sawdust on the ground. But it doesn't matter. After all, this is the real world and not some mindless novel. Hinosuke had already expected this situation. Without hesitation, the whole person disappeared in a flash, leaving only Hyuga Yuki, who was in a coma. Of course. Now he can only race against time, because this skill is rarely used at ordinary times. Who knows how many times his body can withstand this state. Relying on the body replacement technique, Cloud Shinobi, who was still preparing ninjutsu while hiding, obviously did not expect Kinosuke's sudden disappearance. He was pretty sure that the other party had lost the ability to move by now. After all, he had set the trap himself. After all, it would be very painful to be pierced by a barbed iron hook. But the question was, why did this guy suddenly disappear? Already. If he hadn't been in a hurry, he would have put some toxins on the iron hook. In that case, judging from the toxic effects, this guy's violent movement would speed up the blood flow and speed up the spread of toxins. Even if he didn't die, he would definitely die. Lost half his life. No. Impossible. The ninjutsu he prepared at the beginning lost its target and was spinning in Cloud Shinobi's hands like a dove. The huge difference in reality made him feel confused. He held the ninjutsu in his hand but didn't know what to do for a moment. Good. Puff. Kinosuke suddenly appeared at this time, giving him no chance to beg for mercy. A simple straight stab, the small hole in his heart had already taken away the Chunin's life. Then he flicked the kunai in his hand, ending the life of the last seriously injured Cloud Shinobi. Well, Kinosuke, who is nominally a genin, fought 1 against 3 and annihilated all his opponents while carrying a big burden, but now he can't laugh at all, because his body has reached its limit. The violent blood flow made his heartbeat feel as if it was about to burst. The tearing pains coming from his body made Kinosuke gasp for breath. Coupled with the strong discomfort after the space jump, he almost suffocated. Wrapped in all kinds of negative feelings, Kinosuke just wanted to roll his eyes and faint. But how is it possible? This is a battlefield. If you just lie down like this, you will be dead. And Shuiran still needs treatment as soon as possible. Kneeling on one knee, Kinosuke panted heavily, but suddenly raised the kunai in his hand again. What happened? There's another one. Why is there another Chunin? You're dead this time. Kinosuke's face suddenly turned bitter. If it were normal, if he wasn't injured, if Lousy wasn't in good condition now, it's a pity that there are not so many ifs. There was not much chakra left due to the constant fighting. What was left was just running around in the body, not obeying orders at all. In addition, he showed off a big move just now, and at this time, his right hand holding the kunai was confused due to confusion. Already starting to tremble slightly, with no choice but to grit his teeth, Kinosuke could only grit his teeth. Physical strength, mental strength. Everything has reached its limit. If there is no routine plot this time, I am afraid I will really die here. As expected, the flag cannot be set up randomly, and you will be held responsible if you say so. Shinosuke bit his tongue hard and managed to gather some energy. He looked at Cloud Shinobi, who was walking slowly towards him within sight. A burst of shouts broke out in someone's heart. No, I can't die. I absolutely can't die here. Here, I want to get rid of this myth that if you raise the flag, you will die. Ha, Kinosuke, who was shouting in his heart, was suddenly stunned for a moment, and then lowered his head as if accepting his fate, turning a deaf ear to the light of the sword that had been slashed at him. However, no one noticed that there was a smile on the corner of his shadow-covered mouth. The plot is really powerful. Whoosh! The sound of a blade piercing the air came. Subsequently, bang! There was a muffled sound again, and Cloud Shinobi, who was wielding the sword, still maintained the posture of wielding the sword, but was suppressed by Minato Sanin, who was teleported with the Flying Thunder God technique. It seems that you have mastered that technique. Looking at Cloud Shinobi, who was probably the first to be defeated by the enemy's weight on the battlefield, and expressing a certain amount of sympathy, Shinosuke turned to Minato and smiled gratefully. I've discovered some tricks for this technique, but I'm still not very good at it. Minato came over to help Konosuke up and looked at the messy battlefield, feeling surprised and uncertain. You killed 3 Chunin by yourself. It's just a fluke. Finally receiving this powerful foreign aid, Konosuke's hanging heart was finally relieved. He turned around, held the injured body and walked to Hyuga Schwerin and started to help her with first aid. Although he had always been fighting bloody battles, Schwerin's injuries were more troublesome. A powerful thunder-type ninjutsu penetrated her from her chest to her collarbone. If Konosuke hadn't been so quick in his eyes and hands at that time, she might be in danger now. As the eyes of the team, she has always been the first target of the enemy's attack. However, this stubborn girl has always gritted her teeth and persisted, never complaining. Konosuke didn't say anything. Dragging the sick body, he quickly tore the clothes off Hyuga Schwerin's back, and a hideous wound appeared in front of him. Konosuke no longer hesitated and directly stopped the bleeding from the wound and then wrapped it with a thick bandage for her along with the front man. It wasn't until Konosuke finished everything that Minato and the others came over. Their combat uniforms were obviously stained with a lot of blood, and there was a faint fishy smell all over their bodies. It was obvious that they had experienced a fierce battle on the way here. That Jonin was attracted by me using the Flying Thunder God technique, but I believe he will catch up soon. Minato recounted, frowning slightly, obviously worried about something. Oh, Konosuke struggled to swallow the food in his hands. It was extremely important for him to work hard to regain his strength now. They seem to be looking for our rear military supply and casualty adoption base. Minato's voice barely fluctuated, and Konosuke just nodded on the surface, but in fact he understood that neither of them was as calm as they seemed. Because a looming conspiracy has unfolded in front of them. Gang Yuensho and Qian Chengyi on the side remained silent. After experiencing this near-death blow, their slightly inflated moods had begun to shrink. Compared with the previous cleaning and exploration missions, this feeling of being on the edge of life and death is the most cruel. This was different from the controllability of killing Genin's team before. The appearance of Jonin just now gave them the feeling that their lives were spinning in the hands of others. This finally made them wake up, as if they had just gotten to know this land. This is the battlefield. In this kind of almost frontal battlefield, unless you have a strength that far exceeds the norm, just like the future Minato and Madara, no matter who you are, you may fall in a hurry. Although Konosuke and Minato had previously led them to kill the Genin team with ease, their strength was only slightly higher than that of Chunin. Although compared to the average Chunin, this slightly higher strength determined the change. Victory or defeat on the battlefield in an instant. And this place is already close to the battlefield. The previously invincible Jonin may be just a member of the Cloud Shinobi elite force. Who knows if a stronger guy will appear in the next second. Gang Yuensho and Qian Cheng were thinking about this, but they couldn't help but feel a little more fearful. Although the high mobility of ninjas determines that those Jonin will not appear in formation groups, relatively speaking, they have more powerful fixed-point strike capabilities than ordinary troops. The Konosuke team has performed so well during this period, although it has almost wiped out the enemy. Part of the Genin team, but their performance also attracted the attention of the enemy ninja to a certain extent, and it was reasonable for the other party to send a special team. They originally wanted to evacuate later, but they didn't expect the other party to come forward so quickly. Konosuke frowned slightly. Maybe their target is not us. Minato, it's time to evacuate. Suddenly Konosuke stopped chewing, put down the food in his hand, and gently held a kunai in his hand. Yeah, Minato stood up, but protected Gang Yuensho and others behind him without leaving a trace. Then he looked at Konosuke with some worry, but is your injury okay? I think it will be easier for me if you take them away first. Looking at the unnatural trembling of the surrounding jungle, a trace of helplessness flashed across Kinosuke's face. Oh my, we are caught up so quickly, can't we give it to you? Is it time for people to take a good rest? Minato hesitated for a moment, and then made his decision in an instant. I will take them to a relatively safe place. Before that, don't die easily. Kinosuke waved to him gently, and then several people disappeared in an instant. There was a sudden flash of white lightning, and huge energy broke through quickly. There was only a soft sound, but Kinosuke, who was holding a crimson light kunai, was steadily pushed aside. Steady footsteps sounded. Aren't you going to run away this time? Kid. Jonin's cruel expression was a bit ugly. Such a surefire killing blow was blocked by a brat who was just genin. So, the same tricks will have no effect on the saints. Someone flicked the kunai in his hand and flew straight towards the opponent. However, the erratic flight path was quickly blocked by a ninja sword. There was a sound of gold and iron, and then Jonin actually used it directly. The ninja sword flew the kunai far away, and the crimson energy on it was invaded by the powerful lightning style attached to the ninja sword before it could achieve anything, and dissipated directly over the jungle. Has the information been leaked? Kinosuke twitched the corner of his mouth. After seeing Jonin's power again, he finally no longer held back. He suddenly pulled out the long black sword given by Orochimaru. But he rushed directly towards Cloud Shinobi on the opposite side. I have to say, what is the difference between your rampant fighting style and that of a rookie who just left the village? I'm afraid you haven't been on the battlefield yet, right? Indeed, Shinobi's face was calm, but his whole mood was calm, and he turned a deaf ear to Cloud Shinobi's exciting words. Ding, ding, a series of sounds of gold and iron came out, but in just a short moment, the two of them had already exchanged hands. By the way, are the ninjas in Cloud Shinobi all masters of swordsmanship with powerful physical skills? This Jonin's sword skills are not inferior to Tamnu's at all. Coupled with the powerful lightning style, Kinosuke's original injury-free myth was shattered in just a few rounds, and he already had a few streaks on his body. On the other hand, look at Kinosuke's attack. Click. Surprisingly, even if chakra is injected into the ninja sword, such an attack is still unable to penetrate Jonin's Thunder God armor. In the plot, their third Raikage seems to have used this move to fight Rock Shinobi's hundreds of people. It took them 3 days and 3 nights to cover the retreat of their companions. In the end, they were not broken but died of exhaustion. Therefore, this kind of ninjutsu that integrates offense and defense is the most annoying. Someone felt the situation and decided not to hide anything. The fatal blow is launched. The person who was thinking about this in his mind suddenly accelerated in a flash, which was comparable to Jonin equipped with Thunder God armor. Then the other person was still in the air, but his body suddenly turned around, and the whole body spun around, with the blade pointing outward like a whirlwind struck Jonin, who was unable to dodge. Kid, you pissed me off. The constant knocking sound of the Thunder God's armor caused this Jonin to change from a moment of surprise to an inexplicable irritation. He couldn't believe that this brat's physical skills were still faintly superior to his own. Facing this brat, he felt like he was facing a master of physical skills who had been immersed in this art for decades. Such a sudden acceleration, such an increase in strength is no less than the activation of cells by lightning style. However, unlike the dazzling appearance of the Thunder God armor, this kid's body does not show any abnormality. It is ordinary, but it seems that there is potential in the body. It's like being suddenly inspired. If he was in good condition at this time, it might be more difficult to deal with. For no reason, he felt the huge and unsteady force coming from the Jonin sword in his hand. Such a thought flashed through Jonin's mind, and then an even more angry emotion enveloped his mind, making his attack even faster. Go to hell, kid, remember my name, Sasanu. Kinosuke was suddenly startled and thought to himself, what a weird name. However, there is no time to complain about this name. The Thunder God armor on Jonin is like a layer of future technology for individual soldiers, with added defense and status. If he maintains this status, even ordinary physical attacks will be powerful. The kinetic energy bonus also has huge destructive power, which makes Kinosuke have to accept the reality that this guy is stronger than Tamnu, and of course the name is weirder. Could it be that Cloud Shinobi's strength is all linked to his name? Don't you see, Darui, Shi, etc., all the Raikages who use the same name until they are old. The names are weirder than the last, and the strength is stronger than the last. So if you are born in Cloud Shinobi Village, you must be particular about your name. Someone still has time to complain silently, but on the other side, there seems to be the morbid obsession shared by Cloud Shinobi. Sasanu's attacks are becoming more and more wild and natural, as if Shinosuke is like an obstacle in front of him. But he does not have any contempt for his genin status at all, and he will not give up until he is solved. It has to be said that this is the mentality that a jonin who has experienced the smoke of the battlefield should have. Swing the knife. With such a broad and open fighting style, protected by the Thunder God's armor, he is fearless, and his bold and paranoid fighting style is their consistent fighting style. You are much stronger than Tamnu last time. During the battle, Konosuke said for no reason. Boom. The bright knife passed through, bringing out streaks of lightning, but the electric sparks curled up on the edge grazed the small tree as thick as the edge of a bowl and cut it in half. Tamnu, is this kind of thing worthy of being compared with me? Sasanu said with disdain, and while he was speaking, his figure flashed, but he suddenly disappeared from the place. Konosuke was stunned for a moment, as a violent knife slashed from behind. He couldn't dodge and was cut into 2 pieces. But then, with a bang, the body still in the air turned into a cloud of smoke, shrouding Sasanu in it. Shadow clone technique. That's right, even Junyang himself never believed that he could defeat his opponent with one blow. The lives of fragile people are like blooming summer flowers, which will eventually wither in this ruthless world. The smoke on the side was suddenly rushed away, and someone's straight thrust was unusually obvious. The roar of the wind represented someone's determination to move forward. The crimson color on the tip of the ninja sword was unusually bright. After 3 days of separation, we should treat each other with admiration. In fact, after that duel, someone had already figured out countless tactics for Jonin, especially Cloud Shinobi's Jonin. Kid, your reckless behavior will cost you your life. Seeing Konosuke stabbing him without any scruples, Sasanu showed a ferocious look on his lips, and the tip of the knife in his hand stabbed straight out. He was confident that he could end the kid's life before Konosuke's sword struck him. Ding! Unexpected and reasonable. The ninja sword that struck at Konosuke first did not directly penetrate his vitals. A small shield as transparent as air appeared out of thin air to slightly block the fatal sword, and when it shattered, it guided it elsewhere. Poof! A burst of blood mist exploded on Konosuke's shoulder. Someone gritted his teeth, and the tip of the knife with crimson light easily penetrated into the Thunder God's armor, and at the same time, there was a sound of metal piercing flesh. Both sides suffer. Ha ha ha, don't be ridiculous, kid. You still want to deal with our Cloud Shinobi with this fighting method of exchanging injuries for injuries. Although he suffered a certain degree of fatal injuries, Sasanu was not afraid at all. Years of fighting with blood had made his strong body adapt to everything. He was confident that he would last longer than this kid from Konoha and win in the end, will be your own. Puff! A pool of blood burst out from Konosuke's shoulder again. The pierced shoulder indicated that his left hand could no longer be used. In comparison, Sasanu, who was almost wiped by his heart, had an advantage at this time. However, under this situation, Shinosuke was not discouraged at all, but a smile of relief appeared on the corner of his mouth. Finally caught up. What? Sasanu looked at the young man's smiling face and had a bad feeling in his heart for no reason. Only then did he suddenly realize that the surroundings seemed much quieter, as if there were no proper sounds. His Thunder God armor actually disappeared out of thin air. Asshole, what's going on? My chakra. What does the sudden disappearance of chakra on the battlefield mean? The results speak for themselves. Ahem. Some weak coughing sounds could be heard. The person who had endured the constant battle was already a little exhausted at this time, and it was even said that he had reached the limit of his body, but his eyes were still bright and glowing with an inexplicable brilliance. This knife is to repay you for Shui Ran. He gasped softly, and then as if he thought of something, he asked in a slightly evil tone, by the way, how many people have you killed? Wah, what? Sasanu was a little stunned. He didn't understand why the young man in front of him would ask such a question. But then, a huge sword falling from the sky gave him the answer. Boom! The big sword fell with a crash, and the powerful additional attack directly took away Sasanu's life when it came into contact with him. Subsequently, huge impacts continued to reverberate in this area. Sasanu's eyes widened, and he had the same question in his mind as Tamnu. What the hell is this move? It's not over yet. Kinnisuke supported his tired body and came to Sasanu's side with trembling steps. He stretched out his right hand and a bright spot of light shone in Vice Admiral to sacrifice him. This kind of behavior that requires money rather than life is rare. Cloud Shinobi always has such a straightforward personality. In other words, Cloud Shinobi, who is less frivolous, is the best to deal with. Boom. Someone fell heavily to the ground and lost all feeling in his shoulder. Ah, if you leave it alone, he will die from excessive blood loss after a while, right? But, I have finally accumulated enough points for the second life star. Please call me Crimson Flash from now on. By the way, will people complain about such a feminine name? Someone who started to lose consciousness began to talk nonsense. Kinnisuke, is it Minato's voice? This trick. Heroes always come late. By the way, this plot is really bloody. Kinnisuke's world finally fell into darkness. At the same time, in the Cloud Shinobi tent, the dull sound of discussion came again. Sasanu sent information, saying that Konoha's rear base was discovered. Is the information reliable? It is said that he personally tortured it from the mouths of Konoha Genin's brats. Genin of Konoha. It's true. I originally suspected that it was a bait sent by Konoha, but according to the intelligence, the opponent is just a Genin who has just graduated from Konoha. There seems to be a boy who is a genius in Konoha. Now, even in the later stages of the war, Konoha, the future of the village, will not be sent to the front line to take risks, so that's for sure. And Sasanu just cut off contact with us. Then what are you waiting for? Attack, A stream of meteors passed in front of him. Kinnisuke turned around and found that he was standing on a green asteroid, and a crimson planet next to it was shining silently. In the Tower Inn, live by the sword, die by the sword. Death is like the wind, always with me. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. The day the broken sword is reforged, the day the night returns. A string of strange and lifelike words continued to sound, accompanied by meteors, as if there was a story of his own behind the passing of each meteor. This doesn't mean anything. We are not willing to accept our fate. We will never give in. Then, let's fight with our faith. The murmur finally turned into a roar, like a thunder, jolting Kinnisuke awake, who was still confused about the situation. I seem to have had a dream. Someone slowly opened his eyes and looked around. It was still the forest, but he was lying next to a tree trunk somewhere. After feeling his body, all the wounds had almost disappeared. A sense of power surged through his body. Kinnisuke even felt a trace of uncertain special energy in it. Sure enough, copycat online games still have their advantages. Someone sighed secretly, and then slowly adjusted to his body that seemed to have been reborn, and slowly stood up. This is the second benefit brought by the online game. As long as the life star can be successfully integrated, the strange power brought by the life star will reshape the body when it is integrated with the body, just like some standalone game upgrades. After that, it will be full of blood and mana. At this time, Kinnisuke just felt that his current health was not too good. So, what about Minato? Kinnisuke remembers clearly hearing Minato's voice when he was unconscious. Ah, you're awake. A familiar voice sounded from behind. Looking strangely up and down at Kinnisuke's seemingly intact body, Minato felt incredible in his heart. This powerful recovery ability is simply terrifying. With that said, he quickly came to Kinnisuke, but couldn't help but look at his body again, and then said, I explored the surroundings before. Having said this, he couldn't help but be silent for a moment, and Kinnisuke could even feel a trace of unconcealed worry from his slightly frowning brows. How? I discovered that a large number of Cloud Shinobi village ninjas are gathering here. Kinnisuke's face suddenly became serious. This is a war zone in Konoha, but there are a large number of Cloud Shinobi gathering. So the situation is obvious. Is the war going to break through again? But now we are in the late stages of World War II. How can the war that is about to end be escalated again? The extremely keen Kinnisuke seemed to smell a hint of conspiracy here. What exactly are they going to do? Someone thought secretly for a long time, but at this time, as a grassroots member of the war, he did not know much about any intelligence or the combat plans of the upper-level personnel. so he could not deduce anything based on this mere phenomenon, and he could not figure it out. Without thinking about the key point, someone immediately asked, "Where are Schwerin and the others?" "I placed them in a distant location and then came back for reinforcements. If nothing else, they may have strayed away from this area." Minato shrugged, but it also showed that he was by no means the kind of person who would abandon the area. Someone who doesn't care about his teammates. So they are already safe. Konosuke let out a sigh of relief. It stands to reason that since their team went deep into the battle line and killed countless genin, they should have just finished their work and retreated at this time. The best choice now is to find Hyuga Schwerin and the others, and then evacuate safely. However, unlike ordinary ninjas, Konosuke, who has been fused with Katarina's Destiny Star, now has the same powerful battlefield mobility as Minato. For him who can't wait to experience the power of the new Destiny Star, the current situation is the most suitable. He had already seen the harshness of the battlefield, but at this moment, a strong fighting spirit was burning in his heart. This was exactly in line with the old saying, the greater the ability, the bigger the heart, and the bigger the heart, the bigger the stage. Besides, if you really can't beat him, you can definitely run away. And these are the fundamentals of fashion at the beginning of the future plot. In that case, are you going to have a big fight then, brother? Someone's eyes flashed with excitement and he asked directly, and he had already guessed Minato's answer in his heart. This young man who looks gentle on the outside actually has a heart that never admits defeat. What an honor! A smile appeared on that handsome face, and the golden hair was as warm and dazzling as a little sun. At the same time, somewhere far away from the battlefield, Hyuga had woken up and the veins around her eyes slowly shrank. The severe injuries made it difficult for her to use her Byakugan forcefully. But everything is worth it. 1 kilometer ahead, there is a large Konoha military facility. It looks like a military base, and there seems to be a large number of Konoha wounded people there. Yeah, that's great. Gang Yuensho cheered. After experiencing so many dangerous battles, they had been cautious during their previous escapes, for fear that a certain Cloud Shinobi Jonin would suddenly appear and now approach their own base, causing him to he couldn't help but secretly breathe a sigh of relief, and a long-lost sense of security slowly filled his heart. But, looking at the excited Gang Yuensho and the other two, Hyuga frowned slightly. She always felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't explain it for the moment. Does Konoha have many rear bases? Why is this base so close to the frontline combat zone? Is it to better respond to the wounded? With deep doubts, but unable to find any special doubts, Hyuga Schwerin began to slowly rush towards the military base with the support of Gang Yuensho. Poof! A stream of blood mist exploded in the woods. Here was a 3-person team from Cloud Shinobi, consisting of 3 Chunin. This kind of composition of members is already a basic standard in war. A combat team. What's this? How come there is such a continuous teleportation technique? The other party is just a brat. Waves of screams kept coming from the mouths of the group of Chunin who thought they had lived as long as dogs. In front of them, the constantly jumping kunai and the flashing crimson figure were like an enchanting and coquettish Shinigami shadow, easily harvesting the lives of these ninjas. Is this the flying thunder god? Minato on the side was simply stunned. No, there is a difference. Minato looked at Konosuke's fighting style. There is no flying thunder god technique, and it seems that there is no need to jump in space between techniques. Konosuke, you actually developed a new technique. Compared to Minato's surprise, Konosuke kept making comparisons while using Katarina's abilities. Now that he has completely integrated the second life star, his whole body has been transformed by that special energy. In addition to being more suitable for space jumps, he can easily use Katarina's various combat methods and abilities. This is different from the rigid application of a certain skill before. Now he can say so proudly, I am Kat, Kat is me. As Galen's mortal enemy, Katarina has abilities that are different from Galen's open and shut fighting style. Her mysterious spatial ability makes her even better at killing with one hit hidden in the dark. These are 2 completely different abilities, but this combat method is more suitable for ninjas. Compared with Flying Thunder God, Katarina's Shunpo is more suitable for various battles and killings on the battlefield. It does not require magic to locate it. It can instantly appear next to teammates and places with just a thought. However, it is different from the flying thunder god, who is so majestic that as long as he has a spell, everyone in the world can escape. Small-scale single-body jumps also have great limitations. Although Konosuke has now perfectly integrated with this destiny star, the range of space jumps is only limited to 1 kilometer around the body. But that's enough, isn't it? A crimson light flashed, and Konosuke appeared behind the last Chunin again. He gently gave away the kunai in his hand. Before the Chunin could react, a puff of blood flew away, and the Chunin had a surprised and fearful expression. Before it fully appeared, it was permanently frozen on the face, and a vivid life passed away quietly. It is said that this skill is really easy to use. After the perfect integration of Fate Star, the CD time limit of that skill no longer exists, but the use interval of the ability can be adjusted at will according to the strength of one's own body and energy. Looking at the flawless Konosuke, Minato's initial surprise slowly turned into a majestic fighting spirit. He thought that he had learned the Flying Thunder God and was now as good as or even surpassed Konosuke. Unexpectedly, he still left in front of myself. In his opinion, this technique is even more powerful than the Flying Thunder God. Konosuke, you are indeed a genius. I have always regarded you as a target to surpass. I will not admit defeat. Looking at his close friend in front of him, Minato didn't feel any sense of despair at all, he just felt the fighting spirit surge throughout his body. Within the Konoha tent, is everything set up? Jiraiya and Orochimaru sat opposite each other. The location is defined as a wounded area. Once Cloud Shinobi completes a thorough investigation, we can begin to transfer the wounded. We have also begun to select an elite team to enter the ambush area, and I will personally lead the team. Information came yesterday that Cloud Shinobi has taken it seriously. Tsunade's team has started sending out ninjas to detect it, and I believe they will arrive there soon. If nothing else happens, a large number of Cloud Shinobi will enter the ambush area after a while. As long as these ninjas are eliminated, the Cloud Shinobi's strength will be greatly reduced, and they will be at a disadvantage in the battle with Konoha. Jiraiya frowned, but I'm not sure how many troops they will send. It will also take some time to mobilize personnel in the ambush area. No, we have enough time to deal with all of this. Cloud Shinobi is not a brainless person. They will definitely pursue the reliability of all information. They will not act rashly until the moment is determined. I hope so. Jiraiya's brows still didn't relax. Why do I always feel like I have a bad premonition? You've always been like this, haven't you? Maybe I'm overthinking it. Jiraiya nodded, and all the plans went very smoothly. While having a fierce conflict with Cloud Shinobi, he used Tsunade's special range of activities to attract Cloud Shinobi's attention, and specially set up a real wounded area layout. At the rear base where Konoha Shinobi was hiding, after the Cloud Shinobi investigation was completed, they quickly moved the wounded and arranged the combat area, and then waited for the arriving Cloud Shinobi assault force. However, there are still many uncertainties in the plan that seems to be executed normally. There are many changes in the battlefield, and countless wonderful changes often occur on top of the overall situation that has been determined. Within the reach of Konoha's detection, a large number of ninja teams were gathering quietly, including various special mission teams composed of elites. The development of things is approaching an unknown result. If all plans deviate from the basis of reality, the ending will gradually disappear in the fog of unknown. The moonlight is light, like water flowing into the forest. Ding! The sound of kunai collisions was like wheels that were constantly hitting each other, full of excitement and thoroughness. Konosuke's figure was like a whirling compass, with knife shadows surrounding him. The crimson light on the tip of the knife easily broke through the enemy's defense, bringing with it a stream of blood. If Konosuke had to choose again, he would definitely leave with Shuiran and the others. Obviously, the successful fusion of the second life star made him expand. At this time, although he can use the crimson energy that transcends space as he likes, he will be tired if he uses it too much. Although his physical condition has improved, he has gained more energy. The physical fitness is suitable for space jumping, but if you do too much space jumping, your body will also be overwhelmed. Cloud Shinobi's ninjas have been rushing into the border for some unknown reason in recent days, as if they are desperate for their lives. Not only are their numbers increasing, but their overall quality has also become much higher. Therefore, in addition to becoming more and more powerful in various skills and combat techniques, someone will always be disgraced every day, even Minato is no exception. In recent days, Kinosuke's once unstoppable melee combat style has begun to change. In the constant fighting, he has gradually formed his own fighting style. Quick attack, using a fatal blow to end the opponent's life when the enemy cannot react at all, and causing the maximum damage effect in the shortest time. This is the main theme of him and Minato on the battlefield. After all, in a certain sense, both Konosuke and Minato are assassin-type ninjas who prefer quick bursts of combat. Their high-speed and efficient battlefield displacement capabilities make them almost invincible on low-end battlefields, land. What is the most important thing for both sides to face each other? Routine. Ninja duels all rely on routines. Whoever has more routines will be the final winner. In the plot, the 12 little powers use their own routines that are like wisdom to forcibly manipulate some enemies who are far stronger than themselves. It can be seen that the brain is indeed a good thing. So besides routines, are there any other simple, crude and mindless ways to win? Strength. Among them, the most sophisticated nuclear weapon in the world possesses the invincible power of the Jinchuriki. This can be seen from the first Hokage capturing the tailed beasts and dividing the territory to rule, creating a peaceful world that deters each other. The second thing is the eyes. In this world where Hokage is written and read as the Legend of Eyes, every corner seems to be whispering how important a pair of good eyes is. Don't you see, the Otsutsuki clan, Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Itachi, Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Sasuke, Uchiha Kakashi. Well, although I personally think Kakashi might be more powerful without that eye, this still cannot erase the fact that the name of the copycat Kakashi is passed down in the ninja world. But whether it's the powerful power of the tailed beast or a pair of powerful eyes that run through the entire Hokage, it's hard to miss a loser like Konosuke. So what is the other one? That's speed. Senior Fire Cloud Evil God said it well. All martial arts in the world are invincible, except speed. As long as you're fast enough, there's nothing you can't do. Future Yellow Flash Namikaze Minato is a good example, including his later Rasengan, which was specifically developed to better complement this advantage. Of course, as a side note, with enough speed, it would be better if you were durable enough. Otherwise, 5 seconds of real man or something, you can only go to the commemorative monument. Therefore, even though the number of enemy ninja teams continued to increase, Konosuke and the others were able to break away immediately after resolving the battle at an extremely fast speed, leaving the dangerous area before the opponent's powerful Jonin arrived. Well, in fact, if conditions permit, Konosuke still prefers the majestic and frontal-crushing approach. Seeing Madara during the Fourth World War standing proudly among the heroes and one man in charge, brutally tormenting the ninja coalition with one person, Konosuke was very impressed at that time. This is what a man should do, or I will replace him, and so on. Well, I'm a little off topic, the point is not here. Since I decided to make a big move, maybe I can only rely on Konosuke and Minato themselves. Really, what are the higher-ups in Konoha thinking? I and Minato have been fighting here for so long, and no matter what, some teammates have to come out to gank. However, taking advantage of their free time, Konosuke and Minato also discussed this matter during the break. By the way, where have all of us in Konoha gone? They've all probably gone to the front line. So such an empty defense allows a large number of enemy ninjas to swagger in and explode in the rear. Oh, this is really bad. Anyway, since we are going to take this action, let's elect a temporary captain first, right? Minato spread his hands. Since he decided to practice here, it was necessary to find a suitable captain first. From a simple attack or retreat to specific tactical arrangements and command, it can be said that the safety of the team largely depends on the captain's ability. In the previous 5-person team, although there was no special recommendation for the position of captain, everyone generally defaulted to Konosuke and Minato. Now that there are only 2 people left, who should we listen to? Is this necessary? Konosuke curled his lips helplessly. Why do you have to say it openly? Haven't you always listened to me before? Why does it have to be so formal? No, etc. Actually, this is not bad. His name is Konosuke. He was the squad leader of the 4th Hokage during World War II. At this moment, someone has already begun to dream about the future. By the way, the leader of the 4th generation team. I have to say that this name is even more attractive than Hokage. Didn't you know that Kakuzu was bragging about it all his life just for escaping from the 1st generation? Ahem, I think. Someone coughed twice, preparing to formulate something to say. I think it's most appropriate for you to be the captain. Minato turned sideways and looked at Konosuke, who looked surprised, with a smile. This won't work. Comes from the bad nature of a humble nation. Someone suddenly felt a little embarrassed, as if two people were running for squad leader. When you were about to nominate yourself, your competitor voted for you very selflessly. I said that for a reason. Minato kept his smile. It was obvious that he understood what his best friend was thinking at this time. You have a keen insight that is different from ordinary people, and when you are in danger, you always have some ideas that are different from ordinary people, and you can always avert danger. Minato's tone gradually softened and he smiled. Konosuke, I have to say that you are a special person. Although I am a little unconvinced. But I think you will do better than me in this situation. After all, you are the person I think is the most reliable. After hearing these words, it was only now that Konosuke discovered why Minato could become the 4th Hokage in the future. He can always remain rational in the battlefield and make the most correct judgments reasonably. And with this courage alone, Konosuke cannot do what he does even if he is afraid of himself. But this made Konosuke blush, became a little embarrassed, rubbed his nose and murmured. Actually, I think. Minato's hand patted Konosuke's shoulder heavily, his eyes clear and unpretentious. Konosuke, you can do it. So he said. Yes. A trace of relief appeared on the corner of Konosuke's mouth. Since he has this ability, what else can he do to evade it? Both of them have strong battlefield mobility. If something goes wrong, wouldn't they just run away? Someone thought a little shamelessly. In the local Cloud Shinobi stronghold, considerable casualty reports appeared on the command table. In all likelihood, all the teams sent to inquire about the news were wiped out. Although most of them were sent by the likes of Mid-Genin, to kill such a wide range of teams in such a short period of time, apart from Konoha's elite assassination force, it was difficult to imagine other results. It turns out that Konoha is trying its best to hide something. Cloud Shinobi's senior management, who was still somewhat skeptical about Konoha's lack of guarding in that area, immediately understood their mentality. Konoha's rear military base is indeed here. Next step. Put all your strength into it, launch a surprise attack, and defeat it. But now the war ahead. Notice down, the front line will retreat to defense, and ninjas from all sides will be deployed. As long as the base is breached, Konoha, which has endured such a blow, will be at a permanent disadvantage, and victory will eventually belong to us. Seconded. On the other side, the Konoha tent was in complete chaos. Various intelligences were continuously being transmitted into the tent, and then the intelligence ninja responsible for passing orders hurried out and headed towards the next receiving point non-stop. What? Jiraiya slammed the table in shock. Cloud Shinobi plans a surprise attack in advance. 3 hours ago, the frontline Cloud Shinobi suddenly retreated. As soon as the intelligence department found out, a large number of their elites had been mobilized. The intelligence ninja below was breathing heavily, and it seemed that he rushed over as soon as he got the information. Furthermore, traces of a large number of Cloud Shinobi were found around the front line. So it's completely clear that the people at Cloud Shinobi have taken the bait. Asshole. Jiraiya didn't feel the slightest joy in his heart. He stood up hastily, ready to rush out of the tent. It might be too late to rush over now. Jiraiya, where are you going? Came a slightly indifferent voice. This is the best time. Whether it is to eliminate the incoming Cloud Shinobi troops or take the opportunity to attack the front line, we can achieve great results. However, there are still many injured people there who have not been evacuated. Jiraiya secretly hated it. For victory, some sacrifices are worth it. Orochimaru spat out these words plainly, but the indifference from the depths of his soul was chilling. And if you start gathering troops now? This was not the original plan. The mobilization of a large number of ninjas now will only alarm the other side. Jiraiya was startled for a moment, and then there was a trace of confusion in his eyes, but he immediately became firm again and turned around and left without hesitation. Just when the body was about to disappear, a sigh came. Orochimaru, we are different after all. Victory achieved with the lives of innocent people is undoubtedly the same as failure. Quickly notify the wounded to be evacuated immediately, summon another combat team, and follow me immediately. His rough voice sounded outside the tent. Orochimaru, who was sitting upright, was silent for a while and then stood up. Maybe, Jiraiya, maybe, this time you were right. It seems that Uncle Snake is not too bad at this time. More and more ninja teams entered, causing the dense forest to become faintly lively. This time, it was not just the investigation team composed of genin, but even Jonin gradually began to reveal his whereabouts. As a hunter, Konosuke is naturally keenly aware of this change. At this time, they had already withdrawn their previous combat plan of attacking at full speed, and had to start carefully covering their whereabouts. Under this situation, if you hunt too arrogantly, you will undoubtedly expose yourself to the enemy's butcher knife, and then the other party will definitely send more powerful ninjas to kill them. These are inevitable results. However, no matter how careful they are, some things cannot be hidden after all. Within the combat range of a large number of cloud shinobi, it is normal for one or two fish to slip through the net and not be cleared away. More and more cloud shinobi got shocking answers from the survivors. There are only two enemies. An elusive guy with a smile who specializes in stabbing someone in the back and a dazzling and delicate young man who is also extremely powerful. As for their strength, they should be Konoha's Chunin. However, Konosuke, who had no idea that he had been vilified in comparison with Minato, began to negotiate with Minato. If this happens, even the slowest person should be able to tell something is wrong from the situation. This is especially true for Konosuke and Minato. In their opinion, the top leaders of both sides seem to be weaving a mysterious web, and this massive battlefield movement may determine some extremely important factors and very likely affect the direction of the war. What on earth is going on? Even Konosuke, who had watched the plot of Hokage, was a little confused at this time. The plot during World War II was only briefly mentioned, and how it ended was not explained in detail at all. Okay. And when it comes to World War II, it's mainly because the three Orochimaru people won the title of Sannin here. Well, it's time to evacuate. The two of them made such a decision together. After all, this situation is no longer something that inexperienced rookies like them can participate in. But even so, there was one last thing they needed to do before evacuating. By the way, those people who were deliberately left alive should have had some effect. You know, both Shinosuke and Minato are speed-type ninjas now. Even if there are cloud shinobi almost everywhere nowadays, as long as they are careful, they will not reveal their whereabouts so easily. As for being too late to kill a few genin, that's even worse. It's impossible. The reason for doing this. It's just for a certain plan. By the way, in response to Minato's words, Konosuke can always come up with some wild ideas at critical moments. Now that the first conditions of the plan have matured, some of Cloud Shinobi's special search teams should have been dispatched. Judging from the current situation, since the two deliberately exposed a certain amount of strength and reserved it for purpose, coupled with someone's shameless sneak attack before, those survivors must be very unconvinced, right? So in order to effectively capture the two of them, the team that came was definitely not composed of Chunin and Genin who had the advantage of numbers. However, the elite team composed of Jonin should not waste time on this kind of thing. In this case, they must arrest effectively and not waste precious resources like Jonin. So, I think so. There will probably be a team led by Jonin to hunt us down. Konosuke expressed his opinion to Minato. After thinking about this, Minato agreed with this view. Have you found no trace of the other party yet? Regarding this capture operation, and based on the description, the opponent is probably at the elite Chunin level at most, and there is still some element of sneak attack in it. This kind of easy task is very rare in wartime. For Kotobi, it is not too easy to perform this kind of task. But ninjas need to maintain a high degree of vigilance under any circumstances, because exposing a flaw on the battlefield means death, and they are fighting in a local area at this time. As a young and promising Jonin, Kotobi believes that even if when dealing with two Chunin, he must have the attitude of a lion fighting a rabbit. To be honest, it was not Kotobi's original intention to suddenly move from the front line to carry out such an operation to rush into the enemy's rear. He wanted to directly fight with Konoha's ninjas on the front line one after another. As a militant among the Cloud Shinobi, Kotobi has his own ideals and style. Discover the enemy. One of the team members, Chunin, who was responsible for sensing and investigating, suddenly sounded an alarm. Although this kind of ninja was not reliable in frontal combat, he was extremely good at tracking down enemies. Location. The other party. There is only one person, and the current position is, they are coming towards us. What? In other words, the other party actually detected us first. But there is only one Chunin and he wants to challenge us directly. Is he really a rookie who stayed behind Konoha and never entered the battlefield? Who gave you such confidence? So let me teach you the most important lesson in life. Even without preparation, Kotobi was confident that he could kill such an arrogant person in the first place. No, I overlooked something. Isn't it for two people? Where is the other person? Here. Before the detective Chunin could answer, a calm voice fell from the sky. There is no indomitable momentum like a fledgling rookie, nor is there an arrogant mentality of giving up everything to others. This kind of voice reveals a kind of confidence in one's own strength, but is calm but not blind. At this time, Kotobi finally put away the rare contempt in his heart. The other party was not a Chunin who didn't understand anything. That kind of confidence and caution was not what an ordinary Chunin could possess. A fatal blow. Someone tapped his toes on the branch, and his falling speed suddenly increased. Then when he was about to contact the other person, his body turned. In other words, he began to enjoy the pleasure brought by this extreme speed more and more. Judgment. The entire blade is like a constantly spinning death scythe. This skill with armor-breaking effect is really an excellent means to break through the enemy's defense and cause considerable damage. Everything happened in a flash of lightning. In fact, the three Chunin around Kotobi didn't even have a chance to dodge, but they could only hurriedly draw out their ninja swords and kunai to be on guard. But even so, in their opinion, Kinosuke's move was almost useless, and even Kotobi's evaluation of Kinosuke in his heart at this time was lowered by a few points. To make a surprise attack from the air, all you need to do is to hit a fatal blow and quickly switch to ground combat, because the air has no leverage point compared to the ground. If the attack is blocked by the enemy, then there will only be a certain degree of air lag. It will make you a target for your enemies. Now this Chunin of Konoha is directly in the air in a long-term hard fighting posture. Although the rotating blade can bring a certain degree of rotational lethality, with the weakened mobility, as long as the weapon is used to resist his attack, one blow, and then it would be his death. It has to be said that Kotobi's idea is absolutely correct. If he were an ordinary ninja, he would definitely be stabbed to death by random knives after showing off his gorgeous show-off, as he expected. However, Kinosuke's move is not an ordinary move. There are also some ninjas like Chunin who have seen this move before. Some of them have always seen this flaw with battlefield experience, but they were still defeated by this move in the end. The main reason is that an incidental ability of the judgment skill has been ignored, that is, this move will directly ignore the collision volume within a certain range after it is launched. Ignoring the collision volume means that this move will not be interrupted by minions. So, has anyone seen Galen's move interrupted when playing LoL? Therefore, the dawn that the Cloud Shinobi Chunin were desperately waiting for never came. It was not until Kinosuke's dizziness became unbearable that they finally stopped this move. Only later did they see a certain person who was chopped down alive, with eyes that refused to rest in peace. The shock in Kotobi's eyes. Hey, my name is Kinosuke, please give me some advice. Someone stood up unsteadily, then resisted the desire to vomit and insisted on greeting people with a smile. This is simply a waste of time. Kotobi suddenly felt that his brain was a little exhausted. What move is this? People in the village call it revolving heaven. Someone told a lie without changing his face. You are blatantly plagiarizing. However, none of this matters anymore. After a few words, someone finished his words and launched a shameless sneak attack. A crimson light flashed and a Chunin lay down with his hands on his neck. Then the yellow light arrived in time and Kotobi's three Chunin were wiped out. Just a simple thrust of the ninja sword, just a simple moment of kunai pulling horizontally, and the bright red began to spray in the air. For a moment, it seemed as if the world was full of blood. Kotobi touched his throat almost subconsciously. Even he couldn't keep up with this speed. Although he was just a newly promoted Jonin, Kotobi thought that even the body flicker technique couldn't keep up with this flashing speed. Several Chunin were killed one after another, but why was he, the most threatening Jonin, safe and sound? Don't move around. After all, my knife is very sharp. It was still that calm and annoying voice, but at some point, Konosuke had appeared behind him. Kotobi was startled and subconsciously started to activate the body replacement technique, but it was too late and he felt a sharp pain. At the same time, the chakra on his body instantly disappeared without a trace, as if it had been cut off. Now you can talk about your plan. After all, it will be very painful to explode. Only then did someone's devilish smile appear in front of Kotobi. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.